Hello?
Hi, Elizabeth.
Ugh, I think I'm here.
Elizabeth, can you hear us?
We hear you, Elizabeth. But anyone, well, maybe not. Forget it. Let's do it this way.
Anthony, let me know when you guys are ready to get going. I can do the normal pre-meeting talking points.
Okay, let's see. Well, I think we can start. Anybody else who's going to come, it will be, we'll probably know the drill.
Okay. So welcome. If this is your first time joining us, you'll notice that you're muted and you're going to remain muted throughout the duration of the meeting. Everyone will be muted except for committee co-chairs, Anthony Cohen and Elizabeth Ashby, and any presenters that are making presentations during tonight's meeting. Following each presentation or agenda item, co-chairs will call on members of the public who wish to speak. You can participate by going to the reactions icon and pressing the raise hand button there. It's not the thumbs up or the wave, those will disappear. Only press the raise hand button once. If you press it a second time, your hand will go back down. If you're on the phone, it is *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. Be on the lookout for a prompt asking you to confirm unmuting once the co-chairs call on you. If you're having a problem, the chat is available for technical support to help with Zoom software. It is not to ask questions of the co-chairs or make comments. The co-chairs and the presenters will never see those chats. If you're using an older version of Zoom, you may need to go to the participants section where you'll find the raise hand feature there. And finally, we encourage you not to raise your actual hand or wave at the screen because we may not be able to see you. So chat me if you're having any problems. We're here to support. I'll hand it over to Anthony and Elizabeth.
Okay. I'll do the welcoming honors. Welcome, all of you, to the February 2022 meeting of the Community Board 8 Zoning and Development Committee. We have a lot to talk about, and our first person is Ben Jacobs from Council Member Power's office, who will talk to us about the proposal. I guess, well, I'm not sure if it's been reintroduced, but the proposal to alter the essentially alter the Cabaret Act, or the now eliminated Cabaret Act, to allow greater options, I suppose, in dancing in dining establishments. I think, if that's sort of the short of it. And so, Ben, if you could take that away.
Sure. Hi, I'm Ben Jacobs. I know a lot of you, not all of you. I work for Councilmember Powers. I've been in his office the whole time. I'm handling legislation in the budget now. And this was a somewhat legislative matter, though it's mostly land use and zoning related. So thank you for having me. I don't really have a ton prepared here. I figured I'd more take some questions and give you some answers on a basic overview of the proposal. Okay, so going back 5 years ago, or 96 years ago, during Prohibition, the city passed the cabaret law that banned dancing in most bars and restaurants. It was done. It was for most of its existence. It was done. It was enforced selectively, oftentimes along racial lines, particularly early on. It was repealed in 2017 for that reason, overwhelmingly by the city council. But our zoning resolution, which I'm sure you folks are well aware of, still has some vestiges of outdated text in there that requires a burdensome permit process to get a license for for having dancing in bars and restaurants and nightlife establishments and whatnot. So last summer, Councilmember Powers, along with some other elected officials you have probably heard of, proposed updating and amending the text the text of the zoning resolution, so make it so that any bar and restaurant could have dancing as of right. And I am happy to talk to you folks about that.
Okay. I'll start off as other people I'm sure will line up with questions. When you say any bar and restaurant, does that really mean any bar and restaurant without any restrictions? And will there be any restrictions on time, volume, recorded music versus live music? I mean, what are are there any sort of details at this point?
I am so glad you asked, because there is a wonderful thing that New York City has, a structure for providing feedback from folks who live in neighborhoods called a community board. And you guys all have an important step in the process of how bars and restaurants in our communities operate. So that it'll have the same, you could have the same sort of stipulations that you do for liquor licenses, as part of the SLA process. Everything will have to conform there. And if there are concerns about, I've been to tons of community board meetings about liquor licenses for bars and restaurants where there have been specific stipulations about when music can be played and what portion and all that. So nothing's going to change there. It's just to update the text of the zoning resolution.
And so it is, in fact, just to follow up, and others can raise their hands and join in. Just to follow up, so this will essentially remain under the same structure that bars, that basically the liquor licenses are administered.
Well, as a stipulation of the liquor license, you can still restrict the way that the bar and restaurants operate.
Okay. Are there any members of the public who would like to ask a question on this?
I'll just remind you can go to the reactions icon on your screen, press that and find the raise hand button there, and then we'll be able to see you.
All right, well, while we're waiting, we have a couple of four board members. And so I'll take them in order, starting with Michelle.
Michelle, go ahead and unmute.
Thank you. So I have to say that I feel that we are woefully unprepared for this discussion if we don't have the old zoning resolution in front of us and the proposed new text. So because then we don't know what we're looking at. I have a recollection of some of the old what was required under the old zoning. I don't know if it applies to this. In the old days, for example, in the village, where there were lots of bars and restaurants and coffee houses with entertainment, and even in Chelsea, the old jazz places, you had to have, there were restrictions on the number of members of an orchestra or band you could have relative to the square footage and to the occupancy maximum in that premises. That's a question I'd like answered, but is there any way we could get the I mean, what is the difference? Tell us about the old text and then tell us where it changes. And then if in the course of the meeting, or certainly immediately thereafter, we could get a formal copy, that would be great. I don't see how we have a discussion without that.
Sure. Well, I have good news and bad news. The good news is you will definitely get that information. The bad news is we're not at that stage of the process. So this has to be initiated by the City Planning Commission, by City Planning itself. They have to propose a change to the zoning a text amendment to the zoning resolution. That hasn't happened yet. Last year, Councilmember Powers and a number of others were pushing for it to happen last year. It didn't, so we're pushing for it again. I don't know why you guys are having this discussion tonight. There will be a formal role for community boards to play in review of a zoning text amendment, as there is with any change in the zoning text. You know, it goes through the standard process where it goes to the borough presidents and the community boards and the city council and through the city planning commission. So that hasn't happened yet. So there isn't text to review. There will be.
So, let me just follow up if I may.
Go ahead, Michelle.
Because you're saying that there is a proposal by the council member. However, that proposal is a concept and no wording has been defined yet. And that's for the city planning commission to come up with the wording. I mean, what's the concept? Or you say every bar in this and every, what's the concept? It used to be with an occupancy of this amount, or with the square footage of this amount, or in this kind of a district, or that kind of it. So how do you have a proposal with no parameters? I don't follow. Sorry.
There's no changes here proposed to the administrative code or the noise code or the building code or the fire code or the health code or anything to do with the state liquor authority. This is just a change to the zoning resolution. Last year, Councilmember Powers and a number of his colleagues introduced a resolution in the city council asking the city planning commission to begin this process.
So he never proposed, he never had a proposal. He just asked that a proposal be discussed or researched or whatever. But you in your remarks said that the concept was to have this become available to any restaurant or bar establishment. Now, certainly that's a very, very big change. So if that was in your resolution to ask the City Planning Commission to look into that, that is a definite request. You want all zoning. You can't say that the zoning resolution stays the same under that consideration, because once you eliminate the zones in which it's appropriate to have this kind of an enterprise, you have changed the zoning resolution.
Sure.
But are you saying that the councilman didn't?
So
Yeah.
This has to be initiated by the City Planning Commission. So this is the council can't propose, and I'm not an expert on this. What I'm told by land use experts is that the council can't propose this change. It has to be initiated by the City Planning Commission. So that's what the resolution, which will so graciously just put in the chat for all of you to see if you like, asked for last summer.
The reason that we wanted to, basically, we wanted to get a little bit out in front of this. What happens frequently is that matters of great importance and impact in our residential community come before us when they are already on the clock, and we are asked to respond in an up or down vote that is then, I'm sorry to say, largely ignored by the city council. And the fact of the matter is, we need to hear about these things before the clock is ticking. It's not fair. I mean, why bother? Anyway, sorry, this is not about you, Ben. This is about the process and what has happened to us all too often and with increasing frequency. You know, last summer there was a pile, was a pile of legislative initiatives that we had to look at in relatively short order, in part because of the change of administration that was coming, but in part it felt as though if we throw enough at them, maybe we can sneak a lot of it past that maybe shouldn't go through. So anyway, that's what we're, that I think is part of the reaction. And we really need to feel as though we are getting out in front of this. Okay, Sherry, and thank you, Michelle.
You do have a member of the public.
Oh, great.
Wendy McCaver.
Oh, yeah. Wendy, wherever you are.
Hi, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome. So I really want to thank you, Ben, thank you. I really wanted to thank also Ben for coming and getting some feedback. I'm a public member of a different committee, but I'm just also a member of the public and a neighborhood resident for almost my whole life. And, you know, I certainly welcome more business and street life and activity and eyes on the street. And I'm happy to think that this initiative might help that. I also want to have, this is a wonderful opportunity to upgrade laws from decades and decades and decades ago. We need air filters. We need to have restrictions about people smoking on the street, outside the clubs and gathering. We do need to have some sort of noise ordinances so that the noise doesn't continue on into the wee hours in the street, and that residents of buildings that may be above any club are also protected. And we do want I agree with Anthony. We need the protections in place before we know, you know, what we are thinking as a community and a community board of approving or disapproving or offering suggestions. I think we want to peacefully coexist and have a wonderful relationship with our businesses and not be at war. And the way to do it is to set up really good, profound regulations beforehand. And can you address what your office is going to do to make that happen?
I'm here. Is there more that you'd like?
I'm sorry, say that last bit again. Is there something?
I'm not sure what specifically you're requesting. Honestly.
Yeah, I mentioned air filtration ordinances and enforcement and penalties for throngs gathering on the street outside, better air filtration, upgraded air filtration systems so that everybody in the building and on the streets is not subjected to whatever is happening in the club, and various more appropriate noise ordinances. So I think
Sure.
I gave you a couple of things that are just my concerns. Other people can chime in with what they're thinking.
There are a number of things we're looking at in terms of noise concerns, not related to this, just generically. You know, I've handled a bunch of Councilmember Powers' constituent work and spoken to hundreds, if not thousands, of constituents of called our office at this point personally, and can attest that the way the city enforces the noise code is not always tremendous. So we've been looking into a couple of those. They're not really germane to this conversation, but happy to talk about those at another time.
No, I live near the Voodoo Lounge. It's totally germane to this particular conversation. In fact, that's what I was saying. They're shut down now, but I'm totally thinking that it is specific to this and may require special ordinances that have nothing to do with honking horns or beeping trucks or other such noises. This is a very specific problem that can be addressed and can be fixed. It's not a mysterious thing. It's something that can be put into the legislation as part of a code.
Well, we can't put in regulations about noise into the zoning resolution from my understanding, but maybe we can, I'm not sure.
Well, under the 14th Amendment, we're allowed to put in things that protect health, safety, and welfare, so I don't see any impediment.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Now we'll go to Cher.
I'm a little confused on the mechanism. We're talking about a zoning resolution, yet restaurants typically have to apply for liquor licenses, which is not a zoning regulation. So, and all of the suggestions that was just made by the last speaker sound good, but again, I'm not sure that they belong in a zoning resolution. The zoning resolution sets forth that you could have a restaurant in a particular area, but when you start talking about what goes on in the restaurant, I'm not sure that that belongs in a zoning ordinance. So it just sounds like this whole thing is pretty premature. And Anthony, I agree with you, we should have input, but it doesn't even sound like they know what they're going to be proposing. So I'm not sure how we react to it.
Well, I mean, I know what we're proposing, but what's being proposed, but we're not the ones proposing it. Also, I agree completely. The zoning resolution isn't a place to tell people, how what to do in a restaurant. It's about whether the restaurant should exist.
Yeah, that's what my concern is. Yeah. So if somebody wants to have music, do they apply to the same agency that approves the liquor license? I'm just trying to think of how this would work.
Anyone would be able to have music, so it would prevent the zoning resolution from barring someone from having music. Now, the volume of the music or the hours that the music are played, those things can be stipulated as part of the SLA license process, if the community deems it such.
I think the point, Sherry, was that as it currently stands in the zoning resolution, there is a use group that is that in which live music or recorded music, whatever, and dancing are permitted and prohibited elsewhere. And the point of and this is what I remember from last summer, the point of this was to, in fact, eliminate that use group and, in fact, to then apply those regulations or in fact, the lack thereof to all restaurants. In other words, by eliminating the prohibition, it would then be allowable, as Ben suggests, everywhere. And it would be, in fact, just up to the state liquor licensing authority. It'd be up to us to say not too noisy, and it would be up to the state to then say, oh, you're right, it shouldn't be too noisy.
Yeah.
And you're right, Sherry, that this sounds like not quite a full idea yet.
Yeah, because I certainly could see people who, live the same people who are objecting to all the outdoor dining they're going to have the same issues they had a quiet restaurant downstairs from them, and all of a sudden it's going to be music playing at all hours. I think there definitely has to be some regulations. This everybody can do it. I think is just too broad.
Well, there is music playing almost everywhere you go now, and enforcements of violation of the zoning resolution are handled by the Department of Buildings. Has anyone on this call ever heard about DOB handing out a violation for playing music or someone dancing at a bar or restaurant?
No.
Yeah.
No, of course not.
Yeah.
The DOB doesn't even enforce the building code, so it's
So why would they enforce that?
Exactly. Okay, let's move on, Valerie. You could unmute her, Will, if you can find her. There you go.
Hi, Ben. So then I'm a little bit confused what the council member is in support of then. Can you just unpack that for a second?
So Councilmember Powers last summer asked the City Planning Commission to propose a change to the zoning resolution to allow to allow dancing as of right in all bars and restaurants in New York City.
Right. So what I think you're hearing from us is that there are 12, I just read the resolution. I saw Keith's tweet, which was, he was calling on the city to end outdated zoning that upholds the old cabaret law. For decades, these restrictions only hurt small businesses and marginalized communities.
Yeah, because of the selective enforcement.
Because of selective enforcement. So I guess we've seen the baby being thrown out with the bathwater here over and over and over again. So to tell the city with one stroke of the pen to get rid of, I think there are 12,000, one of the parts of the resolution is there are 12,000 businesses, only 108 have licenses for dancing and music. And I think what I hear you saying is that the council member is in favor of saying any business can have, there's no more zoning restriction, and as of right, you can have it wherever you want. That seems to be a little bit overboard.
I think requiring a license for a restaurant to play music is overboard, but sure, I'm happy to relay that to the council member.
Well, no, what I'm asking for you is to ask the council member to come back to us and tell us what exactly he's in favor of doing, because I think what you're hearing us saying, that it just seems like, and we've all just realized, again, the dirty word in New York City is enforcement, be it open restaurants, e-bikes, whatever it is, there's a lack of enforcement. And so what we see here, people trying to have a good goal, but because the city is incapable of enforcement of any kind, the people who wind up being hurt are the people in the city who live in all of these buildings where there are restaurants, et cetera, and there's no mechanism to get any kind of relief. And it's pitting neighbor against neighbor, because once you open up a zoning resolution and you say that a business as of right can have music and dancing, then you put the burden of calling out any infraction on the part of the neighbor, which I think is completely unfair and uncalled for. And the second part is, I don't think, and this is the problem with the proposal with the open restaurant zoning piece, is that it sounds like a great idea, but it's never married up with what the expected enforcement is. And I'll just give you another analogy. It's great to have protected bike lanes and put bike lanes all over the city, but when that proposal was done, nobody thought about who was going to enforce it and how it was going to be done and what the mechanism was. And we see the same mistake over and over again with any changes to existing law. And so I think what we're asking for is, we have lead time here. I think we'd like to know that, to open up the floodgates and say that you can have music and dancing all over the city of New York is somewhat irresponsible, without also proposing what the enforcement is. So that, I think, is the message that I would at least like you to take back to the council member, that we'd like to see what enforcement mechanism and or what rules are going to go along with this as of right. You can do something as of right as long as you're within certain parameters. And if it's not going to be married up, and as of right, you're going to allow music and dancing, and you're not at the same time going to have this enforcement mechanism, again, it puts the residents and the taxpayers of the city of New York at an extreme disadvantage, and we'll always be playing catch up, and it is just completely unfair. That's my opinion. And I hope you will take that back to the council member.
Thank you, Valerie. And now we have Elaine.
Thank you. I think one of the reasons, and I support everything that has been said before me, that we asked for you to come is because Keith Powers is one of our representatives. And we thought it'd be appropriate for him to come and talk to the members of the community he represents, because this was put forward without any discussion or reaction by the community. You're hearing some response tonight, but it's minimal. It should be much broader outreach by Keith to the full community, not only Board 8, but in 6. So I think that's one of the reasons why we asked to come. And it was a perception that there was more in place than what you were saying, Ben. In looking at what you're saying, it's any establishment that has a liquor license can have a cabaret. So any coffee house without a liquor license would not be allowed to have a cabaret? Is that what I hear? One,
There are no cabarets.
Oh, okay, but it's a great question. It's a great question. Music and
good question.
dancing. Come on.
I'm sorry. The words that came out from Keith was about a cabaret. We want to call it music and dancing, we'll call it music and dancing. Okay, we can have tap, we could have ballet, whatever. But music and dancing, you're saying, will be governed by the liquor board.
No, what I was saying there is that the
Ben.
community boards could have the authority to put those stipulations in as part of the liquor license.
No, but you're saying that it's when one applies for a liquor license that you would include the music and dancing. That's
No.
what you're saying.
That's not
You're
what
not-
I'm saying.
No, actually, he's saying something that's in its own way. I'm sorry, Ben. Seems to me to be even more dangerous because now there is even less control over establishments that don't have liquor licenses.
I mean,
what-
are you guys concerned about having lots of dancing at establishments without liquor licenses?
Could be, yes.
It's a hypothetical, but it's not an unreasonable one.
I
There
think it's
could-
unreasonable, but sure.
Well, Ben, do you live in our neighborhood? Do you see?
I used to. I can't afford to right now.
Oh, excuse me. Sorry about that.
I work for the city council.
Well, many of us are city and state employees. It's tough. Let's not go down that road right now. I was born and raised here. It's very expensive. And I grew up in a tenement. The issue is that businesses could open a dance and music place in a storefront and not have a liquor license. Who governs that? Because you're saying you don't need a liquor license. So we have a lot of empty storefronts here because they can't afford the rent. So our concern is, and Valerie said it very well, as did Michelle and everybody else, we are concerned that we're going to be at the end of the process. We want to be at the beginning of the process. And that's why we asked now. And we had hoped that Keith could be here. And maybe he will come to a full board meeting and give us a presentation. But that was one of the reasons, because we have no information. And if there's no liquor license, is the city of New York going to govern and enforce? And what unit would be? Would you say it's DOB? Well, do they have the people power to do it? Are they aware of it? What are the regulations? And indeed, I know of, having grown up here, establishments were in the 60s given fines for violating music and dancing. And we have a number of buildings on the avenues, low-rise tenements, where beneath them are bars and restaurants. And they do play music. And we've had a number of complaints because there's no ceiling insulation. And it goes right through. And before you couldn't smoke, before when you could smoke, the smoke went up. So we do know what we're up against. And our residents are asking us to please protect us. Put the residents first, not the restaurants.
Sure, I hear you, and Will, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Councilmember Powers is scheduled to join a Zoom with CB8 some point soon.
Yeah, tomorrow at 2 p.m. there's a CB8 Zooms that Lori Boris, who I think is also on the call, is hosting.
That is not a community board meeting. That's an individual doing an interview. That is not. And in fact, I didn't know about this. I didn't see anything for a 2 o'clock interview. That's not what we're asking. We're asking him to come to the community board with enough notice of residents, and you can do the outreach to your constituents, will attend to raise issues, not an interview. Thank
Sure,
you.
I wasn't sure on the specifics. There will be a formal process and a formal review for this. I mean, it is going to, if it happens.
The idea, Ben, as we said earlier, and please take this back to Council Member Powers. It's really important that we see him and not even him, see you and the proposal before the formal process, because the formal process we have discovered is just too late. And I'm sorry, my camera has gone crazy again. That's all. I mean, that's really the point. Marco is next, I think. Is that okay, Elaine?
Yes, I'm fine. I'm fine.
Okay, good. Marco, please.
You do also have Betty Cooper Waller seen from the public if you.
Okay, we will let Betty jump the line.
Oh, okay. All right. Go ahead, Betty. It's *6 to unmute.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry I was late coming in, and what I heard just recently when I got in, I wanted to know why Keith Powers is not here this evening. Someone is here for him. Is that Ben? Why is Keith not? Perhaps you mentioned it when you started, but I came in later. Why is Keith not here for this? Hello?
Yes.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Honestly, I think he is. I mean, it's not like he's going to be at a CB8 thing tomorrow. I don't think I think if we're closer to the formal stage of the process, I think that would be when absent a request, and I hear you on that. I will 100% take that back to him. But I'm here instead as staff typically do at committee meetings.
Ben, I'm sorry. This is one of the worst things I've ever heard, and I was on the board a long time. Never heard anything like this. I can't believe that he wouldn't come himself. But what I did hear was that when I came in, that somebody said, I don't think we've ever had a problem with dancing and music. Elaine just explained, and I can tell you when I was on the board many years ago that we had many problems with the music and dancing that was inside, and people living upstairs were kept up by all of that, and so that was stopped. And we're not even talking about outside, talking about inside, and then people would come out and continue making noise, talking outside. So this is not good, and it's very, very bad that we are hearing this without Keith being here. And I guess it was you, Anthony, I heard saying that why are we hearing about it now? Why wouldn't he hear about it before? And certainly we've had plenty of problems with this, and we were able to finally say that it was not going to be happening. And this is not a good resolution, and that's what I wanted to say. I'm really surprised that Keith isn't here. Maybe he knows it's such a bad resolution, he didn't want to give it. I'm finished, thank you.
Well, just for the record, I mean, this was proposed in August. You know, it wasn't, there was nothing hidden about it. I mean, it was proposed prominently. There were articles about it.
No, but people were saying that they didn't know about it, that they're hearing about it now.
Yeah.
Sure, I hear you on that. I'm happy to relay it to council member Powers, but there isn't. We're not at the, again. I don't need to rehash the same points, but I hear you.
Okay, just to clarify, and then we will go to Marco. We first heard about it in the council members' report in October. Was the first time any of us heard about it, and it was sort of it kind of set off at least minor alarm bells. And between October and now, there was, the sort of change, the election, the changeover, all of those things, changeover in administration, and actually a certain amount of disruption in the council members' staff. So this is the first we've been able to speak in a kind of organized, semi-organized way about it.
And just for the record, I just want to say, I'm looking back at my email, the email we got from Community Board 8 on when we were invited to this February 8th, and we were asked for staff to attend, not for the council member himself. So
Yes.
That's why I'm here.
Yes, it's fine, and it's fine that you're here. It's and in a way it's too bad for you, but just convey all that back to the council member, and we'll be very happy to speak with him when there's more to speak about, I suppose. Marco, please.
Thank you, Anthony. Ben, thank you so much for coming. I don't want to put you in the hot seat. That's not my intention. Please forgive me if I'm going to be a little bit tough. But the point is, I've been in the community board almost religiously assistant to the street light committee for more than 12 years. Every single meeting, I didn't miss. I think I missed in 12 years, 13 years, maybe one. But the point is, one of the normal complaints that we find in the street light, noise, 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 and noise. And some of them, they said, I'm going to make some acoustics on the ceiling. They say that, and we don't know how effective is that. And finally, in that range is you say DOV enforced. No, noise enforced DEP. And usually when the noise is complained, the inspector, when they come, the noise is gone. It's too late. It's very hard to prove anything in the noise. And this is always in the community board. They ask, please close your windows, those windows that are operable, to be open almost 100% or at least 50%. We recommend to close at 10 o'clock. Why? Because the noise is unbearable. Why is unbearable? Because our community is residential. Almost everything is residential. On the avenues is the commercial, but the commercial is just only the first floor, is not the second, third, and fourth floors. The above that always is residential. So this group 6, now going more technically, the group 6 is eating and drinking establishment. And the eating and drinking establishment, it's allowed to do all this kind of business except the zoning resolution called to have some live music with 3 instruments, no more than that. And some of them, some of the restaurants, they obey, others not. Some of them even they put in the back. Even they put in the back, still complain. Noise is a major issue. Let me put this way. We have noise, dancing, and residential. You know what made me think? We have a serious trouble in our community, and they have one place that called Voodoo Lounge. It was a nightmare. They have music, marijuana, same as today because marijuana is legal, and drugs, other kind of drugs. And that was a nightmare for the neighbor. We took almost 3 or 4 or 5 years to get rid of that. Why? Because music, drugs leads in another direction in a residential district. People, when they're coming to their houses, they're coming very tired. And usually they need to rest because the next day has to go to work. But most of the restaurants also, what they ask, that is frequently in the street life. They love to have Thursday, Fridays, Saturdays until 4 p.m. Most of them they ask because this is where they make business. But those people that has been working during the week, they need to rest Saturday and Sunday. And so it's almost impossible to have a good rest. And the complaints is always this noise in all the meetings. None of the meetings they said is other kind of problems. Noise and the compliance with the zoning resolution. And the compliance of the zoning resolution, even is the law. Some fellow community members, they go against the law. Sometimes it's very hard to not only to enforce, but also the problem is the fellow community members, they don't listen what is in the zoning resolution, even that we are telling them, and they vote against that. And the majority determine that. And the majority becomes a tyranny when they go against the zoning resolution. So it is a big discussion. Yes, I hear that the city council is coming to an interview, but the interview is probably a more friendly arena for him. And this is something more an interaction with the community, an interaction with those people that has been have experience, acknowledge in zoning, acknowledge in the experience of the community board, especially in street life. So enforcement, you're not going to find an enforcement. Usually the problem, you know what is the problem also? When you put all the restaurants, all of them, they make a mess. And when you pinpoint one specific restaurant, the other restaurant said, oh, no, it wasn't me. It's the other restaurant. Don't blame me because the other restaurant was. So it's impossible to figure it out. Who is the person who is the bad actor? Who management poorly their business? Because at the end of the day, is good management versus poor management. That's what it is. And if you expect the legal license authority enforce something, some stipulations, no, impossible, because they have few staff to review thousands of applications, and the commissioner told us that they don't have time to even to analyze anything in those applications. The only thing they care is group 6 approve it, regardless whatever it is, because group 6 is allowed to have a eating and drinking establishment. So when you have this kind of situation, that the enforcement that you ask the legal license authority doesn't have enough staff to review carefully, because there are thousands of applications and they have to keep moving because they cannot put on hold business. And they are right, by the way. So right now, you want to increase more problems, more complexity to the community, to the residential community. Maybe other community board is more acceptable than the community board 8, because we are completely residential. And that is the biggest concern. In noise, and they don't even, the small buildings, is even hard to become a noise, almost noise zero in that facility, because always they love to raise the volume. And it's almost impossible to catch them. And the only thing that we have, we discuss, is when the community are coming to the community board and said, look, the noise is too much. That is the only time that we face the community, the restaurants. We have an excellent restaurants, by the way, very good managed. But the point is, once you have 1 or 2 or 3, they create a chaos, usually between 2, 3, or 4 in the morning. It's hard to catch at that time. Everybody is sleeping. Any noise that during the day is acceptable, at that time is like almost an earthquake. So this is the situation that he's moving in that direction. And I'm extremely concerned with our part. And thank you so much, Ben. And it's nothing against you, it's nothing against the city council, but I think his ideas, I think is he has to be very careful in the way that we think. Thank you so much, Anthony. Thank you, Ben.
Sure.
Thank you, Marco.
I'll
Go
just
ahead,
talk
Ben.
briefly about noise in general, because this is, again, this doesn't alter the noise code in any way. The noise code is still in effect. Enforcement of the noise code is a huge problem. I've just dealt with it over and over again, dealing with our constituents in CB8 and CB6 and CB5. There's noise everywhere in the city. It's difficult to enforce the noise code. Of course, I know DEP is the one that enforces the noise code. I was saying that DOB is the one that enforces the zoning resolution on behalf of city planning. But for the noise code itself, it just filing a 301 complaint, sometimes it goes to NYPD instead of to DEP. There's a great way to track where the complaint goes. Sometimes it's tough to get a noise inspection within someone's own residential apartment. These are all things we're looking at legislatively and try to hope to try to improve on. And I'd love to be able to come back, and I will come back if I'm asked to discuss those as we get to it. But
Okay.
We're just not at that stage of the process. But those would be separate proposals.
Great. Yeah, you are invited. Next, I'd like to go to Craig calling us from an undisclosed location with palm trees.
Hi, everyone. I had to move from my palm tree location because I wasn't officially parked, but I am calling from California, from beautiful Santa Monica. But I thought it was important to call in because I've been listening to this conversation, and I think anyone who has seen me here before has heard me talk about how the zoning resolution is meant to change with time. And I think this is a perfect example of the time has passed for the current codes that limit dancing and are restrictive for no apparent reason that fits today's modern society. Essentially, that's connected to an antiquated and discriminatory law that is no longer in effect. So I don't understand why we're even having this debate here. There are other mechanisms to deal with the issues that everyone here is worrying about. And I think to me, this is just another example of trying to use zoning to correct the other potential quality of life issues that are best handled elsewhere. I guarantee planners do not stay up at night stressing about how do we deal with the issue of dancing. This is something that should be handled elsewhere. We don't want to come across as the board that is stuck in 1984 footloose society. And with that, I just want to cut loose and go back to my vacation, but I appreciate having the chance to speak to this. And I hope that we don't spend an inordinate amount of time in the future debating this. We should just allow the zoning code to reflect the current reality and find other ways to deal with the quality of life issues that people fear may come about with this, that are in all likelihood unlikely to really fester in Community Board 8, which is not necessarily.
Craig, you muted.
Craig,
halfway through that sentence. Quality of life issues that.
Oh, we lost it. Oh, no, we sort of lost him altogether. He disappeared. All right. I think once again, I have to respectfully disagree with Craig. And the reason I do is that we are once again confronted with the possibility of a revision to the zoning resolution without any explanation of what will follow. And it's the same thing, in fact, as the open restaurants. The open restaurants, the first part of the open restaurants was removing the regulations on sidewalk cafes and extending those to be allowed everywhere. And this feels, maybe completely incorrectly, feels like the same thing. And so I suppose Perhaps we are overreacting, but perhaps not. And that's why we wanted to speak with you tonight, and we'll welcome, when there is more detail, some sense of what will follow this, okay? Because it is part of our business, the zoning part. And in fact, it is the business of the board as a whole, what happens in our community. That's why we're here at all. And I think with that, I'm going to move on to Lori, who I think was the next person up. Yes, I know, Michelle, your hand is up, but you already spoke, so we'll come back to you.
Elizabeth Rose had her hand up first, but if you
Oh,
want to
did
go to
she
Lori.
did? Okay, Elizabeth, I'm sorry, my thing is mixed up
It's okay.
because I switched.
That's okay, no issues. And I apologize, my husband and I are both in the same space and both on separate phone calls, so I'll be as quick as possible, and then you can mute me again. I love going to weddings and bar mitzvahs and other life cycle events because, quite honestly, it's the only time I get to dance anymore. And I miss dancing, and I love dancing. And it's actually really hard to go out dancing. It's really hard to go out and listen to live music. And I think there is a good intent on the council members' part, and probably some of the other council members who are proposing this, to eliminate something that is unfairly applied or unequally applied in its enforcement and in its view of what is and isn't appropriate. I also think it is, every part of the city that used to be the places where there were dancing clubs, and I have no idea where they are anymore, but they have all become residential too. So where do we get to go dancing anymore? So I think there are some things here that are very potentially positive for the city, positive for people who would like dancing and music to be more accessible. I think, Ben, the biggest red flag that I've heard this evening is that the way you have presented this, and by extension, the way the council member is presenting this, is that entirely on the, let's eliminate what's unfair, but with no recognition that there are also unintended consequences, and that there are real concerns about what will this mean for the community. And I'm quite honestly not even clear on what it is on the positive side that the council member envisions, other than eliminating what is viewed to be antiquated language from a different era. So I hope that when you come back, there will be a much more fleshed out vision of, this is what we hope the end result is in terms of the way music and dancing can be experienced in our residential communities, and a recognition of, here are the potential downsides of that and how the council member proposes to address those. Thank you.
Sure, and respectfully, I appreciate that. I can take that back, but what I was trying to say about the ways that the community boards will still be, the role they'll still play in with bars and restaurants in their community, was trying to speak to the checks and balances that will exist in the future. And those are the same ones that exist now. It really is about trying to update the zoning resolution that's outdated.
Okay, thank you. And I think, Lori is next, or was I?
Hello.
Okay.
Yes, I just wanted to confirm that Councilman Powers will be my guest tomorrow at 2:00 on CB8 Zooms. And despite what Marco and Elaine have said, it is an interactive program. So anybody who tunes in tomorrow at 2 o'clock can ask whatever question they would like of the councilman. And then after that, it will be, broadcast is not the right word. I'm still trying to figure out words, but it will be available on YouTube and Facebook and the CB8 website. Okay, so I just wanted to confirm that and to tell you that, and it has been promoted extensively by CB8. You know, they have sent out a number of notifications about it. Thank you, Will. So that's that. Just wanted to confirm. If you have more questions and you want to ask them directly to the councilman, tune in tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Thank you.
And Lori, my apologies if I brought that up out of context. I just saw that he was attending a CB8 Zoom tomorrow and assumed it was.
Yeah, no,
like,
I'm glad that you did. I'm glad that you did. Thank you for the promotion, Ben.
Okay, thank you, Lori. We now have, it looks like we have Rita, Billy, and then we can come back to Michelle.
Go ahead, Rita.
You know, we've had, first of all, thank you for presenting, and we're not that harsh. What it is that we're trying, you know, a stitch in time saves 9. We've had some bad experiences, and I'm sure other districts have had, what was that, Cafe Voodoo or something like that?
Voodoo Lounge.
The Voodoo Lounge. And we had music and drinking and whatever it is. And all we got were complaints from the people in the neighborhood because it was so loud. And basically what I think that's missing here is that you're allowing, or you're asking a restaurant, do you want to have music? But you're not asking the people upstairs who are paying the rent if they want the music. And that's where the problem is would they have moved in if they knew that this was going to be their life? People are entitled to quiet in their own home. So that's what I think is basically the problem. And didn't we, please somebody correct me, didn't we have, there were going to be, the city was going to take a part in finding out which were the noisiest neighborhoods and trying to lower the din in those neighborhoods? I'm not wrong, right? We were going to have.
I vaguely remember something, yeah.
Yes. So here, so on the right hand, we say we're going to make it easier to live here. And on the left hand, we say, well, it's really too easy. We'll go someplace else. So that's our problem. It is yes on one road and no on the other road. And we're stuck in the middle, and we want to say, we pay rent. We want to say, we want to know what's going on. That's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Rita. I want to just briefly clarify a point here, because this isn't just going to allow, you know, bars and restaurants spring up in places that they're not zoned for. You know, if there is a bar or restaurant that is already grandfathered in a residentially zoned area, that's not going to change. But the zoning resolution doesn't really change that. This isn't going to create a ton of bars and restaurants. It allows the existing ones to change how they operate, except they're already operating that way for the most part. It's just updating the law so it can't be selectively enforced.
Then what do you see as the parameters for your zoning? Is it going to be only on crosstown streets? Is it going to be on side streets where it's nice and quiet? We envision it being all over. You envision it being only in a zone. We don't know those zones. You haven't clarified those zones. And so therefore, right now there's an umbrella, and we're standing under it and you guys are pouring water from the top. So that's basically what I think we need to have clarified. Thank you. Thank you.
I don't know how many folks are aware of the city planning, zoning, and land use map, ZOLA. It's just zola.planning.nyc.gov. I'll put a link in the chat, Will, if you don't mind just sharing this around. But if anyone hasn't ever looked at the zoning map, it's there. This is a great tool to use to figure out what's going on. You can look up quickly. You could look up buildings in the city register, find out who owns them. You can look up, check it out on DOB, look at the violations listed there. It's a really helpful tool. And that's what I'm talking about in terms of the zoning. This isn't going to change where the zoning is. It's just simply going to update it in regards to dancing.
Okay, thank you. We have Billy and then Michelle and
Hello, everybody. I'll try to keep this brief. I just want to speak in support of the points Craig made. Look, as I understand it, the issue here is we have a zoning resolution that it's not quite one size fits all, but it really is not very flexible in terms of what type of establishments can be open where. My understanding is that the zoning resolution prohibits dancing in all residential districts and C1 commercial districts. This is just reading from the resolution that Keith put out in 2021. And also, and again, just quoting here, expensive and impractical special permit requirements on dancing and entertainment in many commercial, manufacturing, and waterfront districts. And nothing here would change, well, I guess two things. First of all, this is about having a discussion or a process about zoning changes, which I think we should be involved in, right, with CPC. But it's a question of, is the current zoning resolution too rigid for current needs, for modern needs or not? I would lean toward that it is, and that it's worth updating. It's always nice to, I think, update the zoning resolution to reflect modern times. And then I think, as was mentioned earlier, but things like the building code, the noise code, the administrative code, fire code, all of that remains in play. So I understand the concerns that folks have, that you might have some quiet side street and a dancing establishment shaking the foundations of a walk-up building. But that to me seems very unlikely, and that what we should be doing is just asking whether the current restrictions in place are right in 2021. I lean toward let's revisit it. And so I don't think there's any real call to action here, but it sounds like, Ben, that there will be a city planning process and the community boards will be allowed to have input once the issue is ripe. Is that correct?
Yeah, so if the city planning commission does propose this change as we would like them to, it'll go through the same process that all zoning text amendments go through, and it has to go through all the community boards. And there will, again, there will be a formal opportunity to give feedback. And I get that you guys want to be ahead of the curve there, and I think that you already are. Then that's why I'm here tonight. But there will be that whole process. It'll go through the city planning commission. It'll go through the community boards. It'll go through the borough presidents and the city council ultimately.
And do you know, Ben, whether the current zoning on the Upper East Side restricts dancing, cabaret, et cetera, for example, like on 2nd Avenue, where we already have a stretch of bars and places that play music and so forth? Is it currently restricted like along those more, I guess, commercial areas?
It depends on where on 2nd Avenue you're talking about. I'm just pulling up a stretch here on 86th. It looks like this is zoned C1 to 9. Anything zoned above C6 or above C5 is not restricted here, but it's tricky with the overlays. But it's right now banned in all strictly residential zones and commercial zones C1 through 5. So a lot of if you take a look at Zola there, the map that we'll put in the chat, there are a lot of different sections that are zoned above C5 anyway at this point.
Okay, thank you.
I think I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Billy. Let's see. We're starting to get a big pile of people again. Okay, first we have a member of the public, Faith Frazier. Then Olita, then we'll repeat with Michelle and maybe finish up with Elaine.
Hi, it's Faith Fraser. Just a few quick things. I wanted to agree with most of the concerns expressed by the members of the public and the community board about this feels very vague and mushy. And I would also just mention that I face 73rd Street. I'm not on the avenue, and I've spent the last year and a half calling, after working remotely, calling at night 311 about restaurants on 2nd Avenue that I hear on 73rd Street. So just, even though they're on the avenue, they're already loud. I can't imagine what it would be louder. The other thing, Ben, I have a question for you, and thank you for coming. Did I hear you correctly that the intent was this change would only apply to current establishments, not new ones? I thought I heard that, but I'm not sure.
I was just trying to make the point there that this isn't going to overwrite, residential zoning to allow a bar or restaurant on a block that's not commercially zoned right now anyway. That it wouldn't, it would just change the zoning for it. Basically for existing places, it would change it for all places and going forward, but it's not going to change the way the zoning's structured.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Now we have Alita, and then we'll get Michelle and Elaine, and then we'll move on.
Thanks, Anthony. I'll be brief. I just want to echo, I guess, Valerie's comment and maybe some others about throwing the baby out with the bathwater, that because the problem is enforcement, the answer is not a blanket free-for-all around the city. I'm not saying that the zoning resolution doesn't need some kind of updating with respect to music and dancing, but the one size fits all, which is one of the most the most vociferous objections to the open restaurant program, and I attended that full 8.5 hour city planning meeting 2 weeks ago, was the idea that one size does not fit all, and 2nd Avenue is not the same as Gainsborough Street, which is not the same as McDougal Street, and it's not the same as Bushwick or an area in Queens, and it shouldn't all be treated the same way. My concern is that some of the city planning people and the council members may not be in an area where they will be impacted by this. Lobbyists live in historic districts. They don't live on 2nd Avenue where these towers are going up, but that's besides the point. And the concern is that New York is not a one size fits all kind of place, and it shouldn't be. We're a city of diverse and different neighborhoods, and it should be respected that way. So if you want to go ahead and have some kind of legislation for eliminating zoning with respect to music and dancing, then go neighborhood by neighborhood. There are 59 community boards or 2 neighborhoods at a time, but to treat an entire city under one broad brush and eliminate everything because the issue is enforcement just seems to not make a whole lot of sense. And I understand, as Elizabeth Rose pointed out, that there are some valid principles in council member Powers and others legislation or proposed changes for this, but it doesn't override the idea that people live in these buildings. And when you look at 2nd Avenue or you look at some of the other streets and the restaurants are crowded one up against another and people live above them, it's a really unfair situation to put residents in. Noise complaints are the greatest number of complaints that 311 gets, and it just feels wrong to treat it as under one broad brush. Anyway, that's it. And thank you.
Thank you, Alita. And so Michelle and then Elaine for, we all hope, brief comments, and then we'll move to the next.
Yeah,
piece.
thanks very much. Yeah, I can support very much what Alita said, but also, this business of having to change a law simply because it was passed at a certain time. I mean, it's not to say it shouldn't be tweaked, but I would venture to say that many of you are living under laws that were passed many, many, many years ago, in some cases, thousands of years ago. So some things hold up. That because it's an old law is not a reason to toss it. You may want to tweak it. That's perfectly fine. I also would like to say that nobody likes dancing and music. I probably more than anyone have been at every lounge, every dance place, every cafe down to the Blue Note, all over the city. I love it. That's not the issue here. The issue is how it will affect the quality of life of the residents. And I just want to tie this a little bit to the zoning resolution that's being proposed, the change in accord with the open restaurants. That zoning resolution, and this is something that I can't even understand why this is in there. I don't know who anybody thought it would benefit, but it's taking the requirement that windows close at 10 o'clock and it's lifting that requirement so that now windows can close whenever the establishment closes. I don't see the benefit of that to anybody. I don't see the benefit of that to the restaurant, because in the cold weather, restaurants are heated. In the warm weather, restaurants are air conditioned. I can see no benefit for that to be as part of the open restaurant zoning text amendment. And I hope that that is removed. In addition to the other concerns I have with it, but that's not for this meeting. But we are talking about noise, and that's not a benefit for anybody. So I don't know why anybody came up for that. This new proposal will require a lot of scrutiny. Just because it's old doesn't mean it's bad. Just because it needs tweaking doesn't mean it has to be tossed. And I really think we should keep that in our minds. I look forward then to you coming back and to actually having the old text and being able to look at it actually between now and then, the old text, and actually to see some wording as to what that new text will be. But it is of concern when you have something that is that has restrictions now, and you're lifting those restrictions. That's of concern without discussing the parameters under which those restrictions will be lifted. Fact that it's old has nothing to do with this discussion. That's not a reason. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Michelle.
I'm not going to promise to come back, but you'll definitely get that text.
Okay. And then we had one. Oh, Elaine, sorry.
It's okay. If you think it's an appropriate time, I would like to recommend that the committee send a letter to city planning raising our concerns, because those are the ones, that's the agency that is going to be developing whatever it is that will come out. So I think it would be timely if the committee agrees to send a letter now with the beginning of our complaints based on what we know.
Thank you, Elaine. I think actually that's a good idea. And unless there are other committee members, I don't think we have to do anything except think it's a good idea unless somebody thinks it's a terrible idea. Is that right, Will?
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, so we can write a letter.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, we will.
You have Billy's hand up.
Oh, okay, Billy.
Sorry, I didn't realize. Anyway, look, I'm fine with sending a letter. Obviously, the content matters, and I think you heard from me and you heard from Craig. You know, I don't know that we all necessarily share the list of concerns that have been echoed today. So, you know, I'm assuming any letter that goes out is not necessarily going to say that the zoning committee has, you know, unanimously said such and such. But if the idea is let's send a letter, I certainly trust the co-chairs of the committee to have a productive conversation with the city.
Yeah, Billy, the letter will describe the list of issues brought up at this meeting and will not say that we unanimously said anything, just that these are concerns that were raised at this meeting.
Yeah.
How's that?
Okay. Sure, no problem.
All right, so I'm going to turn this over to Elizabeth for our next item.
Thank you, Anthony. A member of our committee and a member of the board he has proposed zoning changes for some commercial and manufacturing districts on the Upper East Side. Adam Wald has done a great deal of work and he wants to share with us what his proposal is. So I will hand it over to Adam right now.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you, Anthony. Can everyone hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So I'm a 16-year resident of the Upper East Side, and I've been on the community board since 2017. And in all those years, I have been very interested in how in the neighborhood we are going to promote more development of rental housing and more development of affordable housing. And I've noticed that every time a site has come up for sale, it's been snatched up by a condominium developer or one of the hospitals. And there's very few sites available for rental housing. And I'm hoping that with this proposal that we can create a framework for more rental housing development. So if I can share, can I share my screen?
Yeah, give me 2.5 seconds. Go ahead.
You see it?
Yes.
Okay. So what I propose is we consider a discussion about rezoning these 3 areas of the Upper East Side. There's an M14 zone, and 2 C84 zones. And these areas are generally bounded by East 90th Street on the south and all the way up to East 95th Street. And over to M1, the M14 zone, which is between, goes all the way from 94th, it's the southerly half of the block. So the reason I think we need to promote this is that we need to create a historical injustice that has been happened. And I know that there are some folks that have written about this, and that we've created this artificial barrier between NYCHA and the rest of the Upper East Side. And I think that this needs to be corrected, and we need to create a more transitional district that will promote residential development. And as I said before, anytime you go for a rezoning, since 2016, it triggers mandatory inclusionary housing. So this would be by default either a 25% or 30% affordable proposal. And economically, it falls out to a rental development as opposed to a condominium development. There will be very few condominiums built under this rezoning. And I think the reason we need to do this is because there is more and more developers are seeking to build self-storage in our community and life science. The self-storage project on East 90th Street, if you look at the zoning diagram now, it only calls for 115 feet, but that's without the additional 13,700 feet of air rights that they can put on that site. So it will be will probably be close to 150 feet tall, a self-storage facility. And the Taconic project at 309 East 94th Street will also, it could potentially be up to a 20-story or more building. I've seen renderings of a proposed project there that indicated that. And also, it was originally an auto-related area, and we have less and less use for auto body shops in the Upper East Side. So I think that we could potentially look at eliminating those uses to this rezoning. So the areas I'm proposing are, as I mentioned before, the C84 and the M14 zoning districts. These are portions of 6 blocks, 1540, 1556, 1557, 1569, 1570, and 1571. I think that, of course, there's many options we can look at, but I had proposed initially looking at an R9D option, which would have a basic maximum FAR of 7.5 and a bonus FAR of 10, and an R10 option, which would have a basic maximum FAR of 9 and a bonus FAR of 12. With those, both of those would be with the on-site affordable or inclusionary housing. And I would consider, of course, I would think you want to activate the street levels there, and you'd want to put some sort of commercial overlays. But being the mid blocks, I can understand if we don't want to have commercial uses there if the goal here is to promote residential development. And one of the issues that I think there's going to have a lot of discussion is that because these are higher density zones, some of which may be on narrow streets, we may have to look at bulk waivers in order to facilitate these envelopes. But that's something we can discuss down the road if these densities are appropriate for these areas. And so I think the next steps would be to establish a subcommittee or a working group within zoning and development to study this feasibility and hear from the community. We're going to connect with city planning to start a conversation and reach out to local stakeholders to get community input. And last would be to connect with potential private applicants to work collaboratively on a comprehensive basis. So there is a private application likely coming for block 1540. So I thought that this would be appropriate to do now in advance of that private application so that we may be able to merge our ideas and have a uniform approach to this as opposed to having someone go it alone. And then I have in the addendum a list of no action and with action scenarios, and I have each block and all the lots. And I can share this or make it available, but it has all of the areas. The first area is block 1556. You can see where its location. The next one is 1557 between 2nd Avenue and 1st, 94th and 95th. 1569 is the southerly side of East 90th Street. This is where the self-storage building is being built. And then we have 1st Avenue and block 1570 between 1st Avenue and York, between East 91st and East 90th. 1571, just north of it. And block 1540, which is where a private applicant will be seeking to do a large tower. I will leave it at that for now. I don't know if I necessarily have any answers to any questions. I don't know, should I keep sharing, Will, or stop sharing?
Oh, if you want to keep it up, if there are questions, I think that makes sense. Elizabeth had to step away, so Anthony.
Oh, okay. All right. I think that our goal tonight was to get a, just hang on, Sharon, I will call on you. Was to get a, not have too many questions. What we plan on doing is distributing this to the committee so that we can have a more, let's say, full-throated discussion of it, and when next we meet in March. So having said that, I will call on Sharon since she has her hand up, and then hope we can, and Marco, and hope that we can move on to the next item, because this is something that's complicated, and I think we really have to look at it seriously before we take any of the next steps. Okay, so with that, if you could Sharon is unmuted.
Thank you, Anthony, and I look forward to the full throttled discussion that we'll have. And I do just have a quick question. Adam, is this proposal did you develop this proposal in anticipation of any specific development project, or in response to any specific development project?
I had been made aware a number of years ago of a potential private application in the M14s. And the recent filings for new buildings in C84 zones made me realize that there's got to be a better use for this space than 15, 16-story self-storage buildings and tall life science developments. So I thought that it would be more appropriate to create a framework to promote affordable and rental development.
Thank you very much for your work on this, Adam. It's absolutely phenomenal and remarkable. I would respectfully defer to Elizabeth Ashby and Anthony Cohn as the co-chairs of the committee. However, I would very much support a subcommittee to flesh out this proposal after we have that full throttled discussion that Anthony alluded, that Anthony alluded to previously. But I really do like the idea of a subcommittee, and I very much support the idea.
Okay, thank you.
I'm.
Oh, you're back. Great.
I'm back now, Anthony. I want to break the rules a little bit because Elaine Walsh looked up the reasons for the current zoning. And I think as we go forward, it's useful to have that information, and then I'll go through in order. So Elaine.
Elaine, you can unmute.
What I found in the 1985 city planning report and then legislation was that rezoning was not proposed for the blocks where there was existing construction and didn't fit into the R8B character. And that included the John Haynes houses and Stanley Isaac projects. I was not proposed also for the isolated mid-blocks on 95th Street between 1st and 2nd and 2nd and 3rd Avenue. And the reason was that it was bound by high-rise development to the north and semi-industrial uses to the south. There's another area in our district that also has an explanation, but it is in this piece. And so city planning recognized the differences in the areas I described. And I won't comment personally on what was said, but the whole R8B designation was supported by all the civic groups and even the institutions, as long as we looked at the impact down the road for the institutions, which was done later on. But it was cognizant on this planning not to change the zoning here. And I do think that we still need to have manufacturing in the community. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Elaine. And we will be studying this further if the committee wishes to do so. And we will have the report sent to every committee member before we do that, so that people are up to date. Now I'll go through our customers in order. The first is Marco.
I think so.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Adam. Thank you for your efforts. Thank you for your efforts. I think it's a lot of effort that you put over there. And I think I applaud what you did. And I think it's a very good idea. I think this is the beginning of a good conversation. And I don't want to comment anything about the proposal, but I think it's good always to have something new, always that we can understand. Before to go in that direction, I would like to clarify something. I'm one of the practitioners of the zoning and building codes. I don't know how I hate all of this because it affects terrible in the production of my profession. But this is the only way to be fair. It's not that you're gonna create something new, it's gonna be better. No. Regulations always are good. Regrettably, even myself, I find that I'm in a straitjacket. But this is the only way to be fair with everybody else. Otherwise, one can get more, the other less, and it creates chaos. Law and order. That it should be always. Law and order. But people apparently they don't understand this basic, even that they studied the law. So my point is, and I think I did a good exercise with the Isaac development, and I found that this completely wrong in the way that it's used this land. This is the only cheap land that we have for create affordable housing. I don't know when you said, and that term caught me my attention, historical unjust. That is a very dangerous term that depends what is unjust and what is historical. And the point is, yes, we need affordable housing. Yes, we need to create opportunities for all type of housing. We cannot forget just only low-income housing. We need to create middle-income houses, or because all of them are residents of our community, and we had to create this kind of situation. And people there forgot. If you want to put just only low-income family, they create a stigma, and the stigma they said is projects. Then project it means a lot of bad connotations. The semantics are very bad. When you put all the uses together, all the families together, combine low, very low, middle income families, that stigma it can be erased, and they can have good outcome in our community. The conversation is great. I think I'm looking forward to start analyzing carefully your proposal. Thank you so much.
That is what this proposal calls for. It's 25 to 30% affordable. It's true mixed income housing.
Yeah, but again, it's depends also. The financing depends a lot of stuff. I did a very good exercise with NYCHA, so I know very well that part. But I think I'm looking forward to start discussing that part. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marco. And now our next speaker is Billy Freeland.
Hey, Adam, great job with the presentation, and I'm looking forward to reading the PowerPoint more closely. You mentioned 25, I think the 30% affordable. It's probably too early, but do you have any sense, what levels of affordability might be possible on these lots?
Well, it's the affordability that would go in concert with either MIH option 1 or MIH option 2. Certain areas have tweaked their AMI tranches, but I believe that the general framework is either MIH option 1 or MIH option 2.
And do you have any sense of what heights we'd be looking at with some of these buildings? Particularly, a lot of this is at the mid-block level, and I'd have to go back to some of your slides, but I think one you're talking about, for example, an R10 zoned building. Are you able to draw that picture for us? Because I'm just having trouble kind of imagining it, and maybe even more so than height. What are we looking at in terms of bulk and actual density? Because one of the things I've been frustrated by is a lot of the development we've seen is, it may be tall, but it's actually not very dense. It doesn't actually have a lot of, apartments in the building. So I'm curious how we ensure we get real density out of this proposal.
I think the idea here is that these would be quality housing developments. So they would be up to 235 feet in height, potentially. You already have some other commercial uses that are getting close to that height in the neighborhood. And you have self-storage projects with effective densities of up to 9 FAR. So if you can build 9 FAR self-storage, you can build 10 FAR residential, in my opinion. So it would be similar densities to that.
Yep. Thanks.
Thank you, Billy. And the next speaker is Elizabeth Rose.
Audience measure.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Adam, can you just talk a little bit about how this encourages rental housing as opposed to condominium development? I didn't follow that, and it seems to be a core part of the thesis.
Well, economically, when you layer in mandatory inclusionary housing, you have 25 to 30% affordable. It is very difficult to construct a condominium project with that level of affordability and have it be successful, because in Manhattan, you cannot get a tax abatement
Paul Scott.
Condominium housing. However, with rental development, you can get a tax abatement. You can get 421A, which still exists until June 15th, 2022, and that it will potentially be extended. So rental development with a tax abatement pencils more economically and is more feasible than doing a condominium development, which has no tax abatement. And you still have to build the affordable component within the project. So it kind of defaults to rental projects. And that's what you see around the city, and especially Long Island City and Brooklyn, in areas where land prices are high and there's a demand for rental housing because it is partially subsidized through the 421A and promotes the feasibility of income rental projects.
Caught trying to do 7 things at the same time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Next speaker is Gail Barron.
Gail, we can't hear you. You're unmuted, but we just can't hear you. No, you're muted now. Try unmuting. No sound at all. Try to leave and come right back, and
We'll come back to you
and see if it.
Hope revive. Our next speaker is Rita Popper.
Adam, thank you so much for this. As you know, my 14 years on the board have all been, my name with probably is affordable housing, but I've now changed I'm coming in the back door, which I couldn't get in the front door. And it was spurred by what is going on in China, where Mao Zedong said you can only have one child. And now it's 25 years later, and they don't have a workforce. And that workforce is even going to be reduced even further because those people are not getting married and they're not having children at the rate that they used to. My question is, and I'd like everybody to keep in mind, I don't know what the answer is what would happen if we had a city without affordable housing? It's my new tact. I'm coming in the back door. How will the city endure certain things? I don't know what they are, but we should go to people who study this, because we'll end up in a spot, like China is now, and we'll end up with not having a workforce to service a certain segment of our population. So Adam, thank you. I think this is a great beginning.
Thank you, Rita. Have we got Gail back yet?
You have Michelle, has her hand up.
Okay, Michelle.
Yeah, I really just want to say thank you to Adam. It was a very, very good presentation. I know he put a lot of time and effort into it and a lot of thought into it. And I appreciate all the hard work that he did and that you're bringing it to us. And I look forward to evaluating it and having the committee take it under consideration and getting input from others on the board. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Have we got Gail Barron?
You're on the phone, but it won't let you join. Oh, I saw you. There you are. I'm gonna put the other version of you in a waiting room so we don't get a big echo. So you'll notice something on your other.
Yeah.
So just give me 1 second. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess
here we go.
That concludes this.
Try Gail right now.
But I wonder if Anthony has anything he wishes to say about this. I think obviously all of us are in favor of affordable housing. Whether this is the solution we want, I don't know. My one concern about taking this up, I think we have something on our plate that we're working on and have for a great many years, more time. We'll be describing it a bit later where we are. But I think our special districts to protect First, Second, Third, and York Avenues are tremendously important. And whatever else we do, I think it can't impede or interfere with that particular proposal, which is getting forward a little bit now later, which I'll tell you about later.
If I could respond.
Okay, Michelle, you had another comment?
She just raised her hand. The thumb.
Elizabeth, if I could just respond to that really briefly, can I just say one thing to that?
Okay, well, back to you, Anthony.
Go ahead, Adam.
The two things I was going to say to that is that there are first of all, this doesn't conflict with anything that's happening in the special districts. Secondly, there are private applications coming. So the reason I thought it was appropriate to do this now is so that we can work together with those private applicants. Otherwise, it's going to be done piecemeal. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Thank you, Adam. I think that a worthwhile point. The next item on the agenda is, oops, there we go, is.
Sorry, Anthony, I muted you and I was trying to mute Adam.
Okay. There were three things in the budget this year that have to do with that do have to do with zoning and do have to do to a certain extent with us. One, not very much at all, which is permitting accessory dwelling units. It's backyards in single family, basically single family zones, which we don't really have. We don't have any actually in our district. And so that doesn't have very much to do with us. There is, however, as part of the proposal, part of the budget, a proposal to remove the state's restriction on residential FAR. There's currently a cap of FAR 12 for residential uses in New York City. The argument is that by removing this cap, we'd be able to have a lot more. We'd be able to have a lot more housing built and much denser housing in what is already the densest part of the densest county in the country. And at least as far as we're concerned, it's all about us. The point is, I think that this is, just to my personal way of thinking, not something that we would like to have happen. It would obviously still have to be approved by the city, but the point of this little section in the bill is that it would allow the city the state would remove its barriers to increasing FAR, residential FAR beyond 12, which in a way could have a negative effect on our community. And the third is once again the conversion of hotel and commercial space into residential housing. We don't have very many Class B hotels in Community Board 8, but they would be allowed to turn themselves into residences without a change in their certificate of occupancy. And it would also allow certain commercial office buildings to be converted to residential uses. Presumably, they would at least have to change their C of O. And then I suppose the point of all of these rules is to make it easier to do stuff that might not actually be a good idea. I don't know how, I read this all today, and so it's sort of fresh, but I would propose from the chair, if I'm allowed to do, co-chair, if I'm allowed to do that, that perhaps we write a letter to the elected if we have an opinion on this at all. So with that, okay, we have Marco, Adam, Alita, we're starting to pile up. Okay, so Marco, and I don't think we have to make this a very long discussion. Lots of things that are in the budget never get done. A lot of the bad stuff that was proposed last year didn't get done either, but we're sort of, maybe we need to jump up and down and wave our arms. Marco.
Thank you, Anthony. I did recently a profile of your First, Second, and Third Avenue, helping the consultant. That allows me to think how high is the area that they already go beyond 210. The goal is basically was to look the skyline of the Upper East Side in the area unprotected. And from that part, it came directly my analysis that saying, wait a minute, how many buildings went beyond 210? And I found it was like 140. And then I said myself, well, who are they? Those buildings were exactly, it was a big chunk for medical that use Euler. And Euler, we don't have no benefits, just only the developers. And then you have another group that I founded that they use to produce affordable housing. And then I said, wait a minute, affordable housing? And I said, it disappeared, evaporate, affordable housing. So the only tool that we have is the 210. This application that we file, or we are planning and we are in the process to file, Evans, I think is the key of all of that. So the community have an opportunity to create different types of housing, not only affordable, all types of housing. And this is where the only way that we can negotiate properly and we can obtain benefits for the community. And if we allow the state in a very political manner, without no input in our community, without not even understanding what is the role of, what is our community, they just want to remove one of the I think is one of the law of the multiple dwelling law. And the multiple dwelling law, they just only allow to be in effect only for cities that do not have more than 1 million of people. I think it's 400 or 300 people. In that case, New York City is exempt in most of the multiple dwelling law. Why? Because they have its own regulation, even more stringent than the multiple dwelling law. So if the multiple dwelling law step in, just only what they doing is rather to have the maximum floor area 10, now the floor area, because when we file in the Department of Buildings, usually the zoning that we use, or the information that we use for zoning calculations is according with the hierarchy of the law. In this case, the multiple dwelling law, it will be superior to the zoning resolution of New York City. So I think it's extremely dangerous. It goes against our intentions to put our unprotected streets, and I think it's wrong. It's just only, I think it's a political movement. It's not with benefits for our community, and I think we have to stop completely that part, and that is wrong. And I think we having our own zoning resolution and having all regulations now put in place, if a developer are coming and saying, we want to produce affordable housing or middle income housing, well, welcome, come, but maintain your words and not evaporate in 10 or 20 years. And I think it's wrong. Any affordable housing has to be in perpetuity. Any middle housing, it has to be in perpetuity. Otherwise, what we're doing is just only to resolve for 20 years the problems, and in 20 years plus the other housing that will be in deficit, it will increase more. So I think it's wrong, and I think we have to send a letter saying that it's wrong to affect the zoning resolution of New York City. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. Next we have Adam and then Alita. I think
I'll keep it short. If we can build 24, 27, 30, and 33 FAR office buildings, we can build 14, 16, 18 FAR residential buildings. It will also make it easier to convert overbuilt office buildings into residential uses, those that are built over 12 FAR. That's that.
Okay, thank you, Adam. Alita.
Thank you. First of all, it shouldn't be in the budget because things in the budget get passed. Sometimes we've seen something awful that was in the budget get passed last year or the year before, hard to keep track. So that's a really bad way to go. I've also written to some of our elected officials who have told me that they are opposed to this, but who knows what people up there in Syracuse or Albany or Westchester think. Second of all, or third of all by now, this is a very dense community. They go as high as they want, and we don't see any affordable housing being built. We're losing affordable housing. Density in itself is only an excuse for additional profits. And I can only imagine what they're going to be. There's no affordable housing being built, not when apartments are starting at $3 million. There are 4 buildings that were starting at $3 million. $5 million or 5.5 on 78th and Lexington. The same thing, I think, on 83rd and 3rd. And it's a disaster for the community. You go other places, I'm always astonished. And I know I've said this before, when I go downtown and I see sky without having to stand in the middle of an avenue. We are too dense, and we are seeing nothing from this except benefits to developers who, as I mentioned before, live in historic districts. So they're not confronted with the kinds of density that we're talking about. And it's wrong. There's no guarantee it's going to bring anything in to this community, and other communities also deserve the opportunity to have input. These decisions should not be made by state legislators under the guise of affordable housing when there's zero proof that it will give us any additional affordable housing. The bigger problem is that the city has ceded on the state all responsibility for affordable housing to private developers, and that is wrong. The city should be building affordable housing. Mitchell-Lama never should have gone market rate. The state should be building affordable housing. It should not be left to private developers who always want more than they give. I'll get off my podium right now, but that's what I have to say. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Alita. No patience needed. Elaine.
Hi, thanks. Following up on what Alita said, I've spoken to all of our elected officials that are totally opposed and will in the assembly fight not to put it into the budget. The Senate is concerned for the first time because they're not quite sure what's going on, but they've fought it and they hope that they'll win. So we do have our electeds on board with this. I think we need to get to the governor also. The other comment on the whole conversion of hotels, where's the infrastructure? So we convert to housing for families. Where are the schools, the supermarkets, etc.? There is no support in those areas. They're business communities. And that will be a devastation. We'll have kids on buses going forever and ever to school, etc. My concern is really the cap, the FAR 12, and we must keep it.
Thank you, Elaine. I think that means we are going to move to Elizabeth and the next item in our agenda. No,
Alita.
no. Alita's waving her arms madly. Okay.
Thank you. I forgot to ask you, someone texted me and asked if you're sure you're correct that if the state lifts the cap, the city can still keep it.
Yes, the city can still keep the cap. They would then the city would have to then go through yet another change to the zoning resolution. All that the state removing the cap would remove a barrier to the city then changing the zoning resolution in favor of more in favor of the real estate interests.
But as a lawyer would say, and well, I am one, arguably, it's a really bad way to go to lift the cap so that the city can do this for itself when, once again, one size does not fit all. And living in the densest community in the country, it really will have a huge additional impact on us. And I can't speak for any other community because I'm not in their boots, but it's a bad way to go. We don't see anything positive. But I already said all of that, so I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Alita.
I just wanted to ask that.
And to turn it over to Elizabeth for our next item.
Okay, this is just an update on our long-standing proposal for the First, Second, Third, and York Avenues. Pretty well every street and avenue on the Upper East Side has a height limit now. We've done, we have either contextual zones or special zoning districts, everything, but these areas are not protected. And our proposal, as you probably know, but in case there's somebody new along with us, they preserve the low-rise buildings and tenements, which protects the affordable housing. Because I think the Upper East Side is, our problem is we lose it and we don't get anything much in return. So we're in big deficit. So that protects that. It's a height limit of 210 feet. Every other wide street and avenue on the Upper East Side has the height limit of 210, with the exception of Lexington, which is 175. So this is the prevailing zoning, and we also protect the local stores. And I heard from our planner, and he is almost finished with the amended application, because the Department of City Planning made some changes in what you have to do with the planning. The proposal has to do with that. And also they asked, we had two applications, one for Yorkville and one for Lenox Hill special districts. We still have two, but they wanted it merged into one. He's going to get the application to us soon for our review, and we will then file it. The one piece of good news, and I hope it continues, is we've been more or less in the past, I mean, to say we've been ignored by the Department of City Planning is to say we've been treated well. He's now having a better time with that, and that's a good idea. And I will mention, following the previous item, that he feels quite rightly that we better hurry this up because the areas of the Upper East Side that will be damaged by the governor's bad idea for removing the cap are First, Second, Third, and Fourth and York Avenues. So that's where we are, and I hope that next month we have even better news to provide to everybody. But I think that as we go along, every time a bad idea comes along, it proves that we need this proposal and we need it fast, because bad ideas are not going anywhere. Okay, so the first person to speak is Michelle Birnbaum.
Thanks, Elizabeth. What I was going to do is say, I think we need a resolution on the past item on the removal of the of the 12 FAR cap. So I would like to make that resolution. I think we've all spoken to it. I'm up to all of you participating on how you would like to word it, how would Anthony and Elizabeth like to say it, but I would like to make a resolution in opposition of the removal of the 12 FAR cap on residential zoning districts. And if seconded, all of you can speak to it. So I think Marco seconded it. He's got his thumb up.
Yes, and so did Elaine, actually. So now, motion has been made and seconded. And we have on the previous item, which was the discussion of the lifting of the 12 FAR cap.
That's the one that I have the resolution on.
Yes.
We're going back to yours.
Yeah. So I'll go ahead and do this, Elizabeth, and then you can pick us up when we're done here. The only wonderful idea, the only problem is it isn't the budget supposed to be done at the end of next month? Oh, no, we have time then. Okay. It's only February. All right, so a motion has been made and seconded, and I think that there are a number of people who wish to speak on that motion. And I guess that would be starting with Marco.
Thank you. I think one of the issues that we had to raise is the city of New York always issued me 100 by the zoning resolution, because if it's more stringent, the multiple dwelling law, which is the state, always will be predominant the state. So we have to protect our own zoning resolution that we have. So that will be one point that we have to discuss. The second point is to demonstrate that the affordable housing that we are producing, basically what I found it is, in reality, is we are not producing affordable housing. We are not producing middle income housing. And even if we produce, it evaporates in 20 years or 40 years or 30 years. So what it is we delay our responsibilities for the future generations, and the next generations we have to face the present deficit of affordable housing with the future deficit of affordable housing. It becomes more very hard to resolve that housing conditions. So our housing conditions we have to analyze with benefits of the air rights. In the study that I did, in the section that I did on the cross sections of the avenues, I found that that's very important. Approximately 33% of all buildings that pass 210 are POPs. And POPs, we didn't have almost no benefits. The community didn't have the real benefits of POPs, because POPs is completely wrong, and that's what removed. homes, even though myself, I love that idea. But it was, I don't want to use this word, but was corrupted, the main idea, the spirit of that part. The second part, it was created for affordable housing. And I saw large developments, and all of them is for affordable housing. And when I tried to figure it out, it really worked with affordable housing. Not. Now it become a market rate housing. So we are not doing nothing to protect those residents that has been living in the dark. And the third group are the hospitals that we don't benefit anything at all. It's just only the hospital benefits using and abusing the ULR applications. And finally, we have the private developments. The private developments, believe me or not, in the Upper East Side just only represent the 10% that those buildings that went higher than 210. So this is the real situation of the Upper East Side. This is the elements that we have to see is we want to negotiate something, but we need to have immediately our 210. It could be higher, but I know that. But let's go start with 210, and then later we negotiate in order to do something in perpetuity for all types of housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Marco. Next, we have Billy and then Elaine.
Yeah, I'm either going to abstain or probably vote against the resolution. Frankly, I just want to know more, for starters. Second, one of my understandings, and maybe I'm wrong, is that we obviously are concerned about height, but height and FAR, as so many of you know far better than I, is not always the same. There's been a criticism made of the current FAR 12 cap, which is that it's resulted in developers building things in inefficient ways to maximize profit. It's one of the reasons why we're getting the super tall, skinny buildings, that if you had a higher FAR cap, you might get wider but shorter buildings. Now, I don't know whether that's all true. What I'd like to know is understand this better. And for us to put out a resolution without having heard more argument, or at least for me, without having heard more argument, I can't support it. And lastly, we've just come off a conversation about wanting more affordable housing in the district. It's one of our top 3 district needs. So I guess my question is, how do we expect to get that more affordability out of these lots that are already zoned to the max if we don't have an increase in the FAR cap? If you increase the FAR cap, you can at least shoehorn in requirements for affordability, because you can do it at the city level. You can rewrite the zoning code accordingly. But something that's built as of right now for FAR 12, and please tell me what affordability we'll get out of that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we're getting any currently. So I don't know that raising the cap is the answer, but I'm not sure that it would be a mistake. And so I'd like to have some more debate and presentation on it, certainly before voting for the resolution.
Thank you, Billy. I think, to sort of put it simply, the reason we don't have more affordable housing is it costs a lot of money to build anything in New York. And because, as Alita so eloquently pointed out, we are now fully reliant on private enterprise to build all of our housing. The vast majority of that housing is absolutely positively guaranteed to not be affordable. It costs just as much money to build an affordable apartment as it does to build a luxury apartment. And when you rent them, you rent the luxury apartment for more money, and you make more money as a developer. And it's as simple as that. If the FAR were increased to 1,000, it wouldn't matter. You would then have buildings that are 1,000 FAR of unaffordable housing. That's just my personal opinion. We have Elaine, and then Alita wants to comment again.
Billy, did you say something? Were you done?
Well, I don't know. I wanted to ask a follow-up, but if that's not allowed, I'll stop.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, right. So obviously there's what the state would do, but at the city level, why couldn't we require that if you're currently, as of right, zoned for FAR 10, FAR 12, whatever, and you want to go up to this new maximum, you have to participate in the MIH program, which, by the way, I know all the criticisms of. It's not perfect, and I'm also probably the biggest social housing proponent you'll find here. But being realistically on the Upper East Side, we don't have a lot of property lots that are going to suddenly become social housing. So why wouldn't we be able to shoehorn in at least an MIH program?
Well, I think the simple answer is that I'm sorry to sound so cynical and negative, because I'm really not. We are then relying on the city government to, and I say this with air quotes, do the right thing. And I believe that our recent experience, city government and private developers, to do the right thing. And the fact of the matter is that frequently they do not. Again, just my opinion, not as co-chair of this committee. And I think that the maximum of FAR 12 is, at least to a certain extent, a way to protect the physical characteristics of the residential neighborhoods. And FAR 12 is a pretty big building. So with that, Elaine.
I was going to call the question, but I need to respond to Billy and anybody else who's wondering why we don't have affordable. Historically, when developers were coming in to build, they were by law to include affordability in their buildings. Deals were cut with the other boroughs, developers, and politicians to move that affordable out of our area and into other boroughs or other parts of Manhattan. The comments made were that it was too expensive to build affordable housing in this community, and therefore we should not have it. I testified on the state many years ago in HPD and for the need for affordable. There was a good government group that got up and said, we're not entitled because it's too expensive. I got back up and I said, I'm sorry, our community wants affordable. Historically, we were gypped, not through our reasons, but because of the elected officials and developers who wanted something else. It's a disgrace. It was a violation. It still continues to be a violation. And one of the bigger issues is nobody knows how to track where the affordable units are when they're put inside. I have a building across the street from me, 200 East 79th. It was to have affordable units. There's not one in there. And the developer, when they came to ask for the 421A, I asked why and where were the affordables. They had no idea what I was talking about. As far as the 12 FAR, is an apartment building on Lexington and 86th Street, northeast corner. They have there's affordable units. It was granted offsite, but they were able to build a very solid, large apartment building with 12 FAR. So it can be done. We don't have to go larger. And let me tell you, goes larger, we'll never see the affordability. I'm sorry. You're cynical, Anthony. So am I. I've lived through the fights.
Thank you, Elaine. Now, was that you calling the question, or are we going to?
If you don't mind, before, and Elaine, you were muted, but Mrs. Brown was trying to raise her hand and she wasn't able to, so she chatted me. So
Okay.
Before you guys call the question, I think it would be fair to let her speak.
Sure.
But
all right, and then
ahead,
I'll speak after Mrs. Brown.
Thank you, Elaine. And I agree with the comments that you made with regard to affordability and what has happened in the past. But can we, as a community board, get the electeds and the developers together in a room and talk about going forward and defining what is affordability and get a commitment. And that's what I'd like to see. This is 2022, and there is no reason why we can't figure out a way to make it profitable for the developers to do affordable housing. So that is my question, and that is my desire. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak so we can call question. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Brown. I think Alita wanted to speak again, and we probably should let her. And also, well, we have Rita for the first time. So perhaps Rita, then Alita, and Michelle. And I'm not sure if Elaine actually wants to speak or just call the question. But let's. So Rita, then Alita.
We're a team, Alita and Rita. Sometimes I don't even know if you're calling on me, but you know, I've done a lot of work with Mitchell Lama, and I will tell you that I know most of the developers, and not one of them walked away a poor person from that program. Now, there are aspects of that program, and city and state and federal government have to chip in the interest rate was 0 on money that they borrowed to put up. They only had to pay it back if they were buying out of the program, which was 20 or 25 years later. It can be done again, only if you want it to be done again. And it's, you know, as I said, there are two parts of this. What happens if we don't do it? What happens to the city if we don't do it? Where are those people going to, if there's another pandemic and you need people to take care of people and they don't live here and they can't get here? You know, this was a door opener, this pandemic, to realize that we're vulnerable. We're vulnerable and we can't do anything about it except go with the tide. So I think what we need to do is understand what went into affordability, how they made money, and how they will make money continue. But what it is with condos, they get their money back immediately. They put up the building, they sell all the condos, and they have the money, and they're out, and their money is returned. In a rental, it wasn't that way. So I will be more than happy to get information from my developer of my building, who is very successful, who said they all love the Mitchell Lama program. They hated the paperwork. So I will find out some information for you, but the question is, what happens if we don't have it? Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. I think we have Alita quickly, I hope. Michelle also quickly, and then Elaine.
Anthony, Andrew Ravasquier has his hand up.
Okay.
I will wait patiently.
Okay. All right, Andrew, please.
Alita, thank you so much for the assist, and it's been a really good discussion, and not only about this point, but the preceding points before this. And Adam, I really enjoyed your proposal on how we can get more affordable housing in the area, and I'd love to talk about it further. We absolutely need the 210-foot height cap, one for housing reasons and the other for environmental reasons. Alita was the one that shared the number with me. We've lost since 2007 over 14,000 rent stabilized units just in this community board area alone. We've seen nothing but construction of very large, tall buildings in this area. That alone, through empirical evidence, should show us that the link between building tall and building affordable is not. It's not existent. How many more times do we have to do it to find that the affordable housing is gone? And we've realized that we've made irreversible mistakes. We're also losing our mom and pop shops every time we are eliminating the shorter tenement buildings. And for every dollar spent at a mom and pop shop, 66 to 67 cents stays within the local community. It's eyes on the street. When I began walking by myself, there were often safe haven signs in these lower, more tenement buildings, like Annalisa's coffee shop. And I would be able, as I was gaining independence, go into a safe store to find shelter, which sometimes is necessary. But let's also talk about the climate change pollution. And I'm going to share a link with Will that maybe he's going to share with everyone else, because I've been testifying about climate change pollution exponentially increasing after 10 floors, which is around 100 feet, and 210 floors, or 210 feet, which is around 21 stories. Thank you, Will, for sharing. I got that because I'm a peer-reviewed cellular researcher, and I was just able to interpret data by myself. But now Bloomberg and the UN are also talking about the need for dense but low to medium rise housing so that we do not kill ourselves in the climate crisis. It will not matter how much affordable housing we have if First Avenue is already flooded and we become Venice, and it will not be charming. We already saw a once-in-a-century storm with Hurricane Sandy where the FDR was flooded. We had Hurricane Ida where things became flooded again. American innovation is not dead because we've invented snow squalls and fire tornadoes. And I don't know what other events it's going to take for us to realize we have to incorporate sustainability in every single thing that we do, including housing. We have to have an absolute cap because the climate change pollution does not care if the housing beneath it is affordable or not. We have to cut it off now. And when buildings are quote unquote LEED certified or they're rated A for environment, it's bull, because the Bank of America building that was supposedly the charm of the city, it was a tall building, but it was clean, is one of the worst polluting buildings in the entire city. I spoke 2 years ago about the urban heat island. Again, it sounded like a quirky area, that when you have a bunch of tall buildings together, the ground temperature gets warmer. And that's not only uncomfortable and ironically increases energy usage through air conditioning, which just exacerbates the problem in a positive energy loophole or cycle, but it's actually detrimental to us on a cellular level. It makes us less resilient to viruses. It increases asthma rates and cardiovascular disease rates. We need this 210 cap. It is non-negotiable. I'm so thrilled that when I got to host the forum along with Sandrea Coleman and NYCHA, Julie Menon said she was for a non-negotiable 210-foot height cap because the pollution does not care if the housing beneath it is affordable. And as we've seen through empirical use or data or observations, building tall is not building affordable. I'm looking forward to building with, people in the housing committee and this committee, a district-wide plan where we can increase the housing that is actually affordable while also not killing ourselves with climate change pollution. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Andrew. We wandered a little bit from the subject at hand. Hopefully, Alita, Michelle, and Elaine will confine themselves to what we're talking about.
I will about the FAR proposed change, which would, I honestly and cynically think, do nothing to bring in affordable housing, because really REBNY runs New York. Other cities have requirements that are not as of right buildings. The problem is as of right means they get to do what they want. And even when there's an ostensible regulation mandating some kind of affordable housing, there are always loopholes. The Soho NoHo plan to rezone talked about the whole point of it was to bring in affordable housing and increase economic diversity and racial diversity. So aside from it being 25 to 30% affordable housing, which when you subtract from 100% means 70 to 75% non-affordable, which actually changes the diversity and lessens whatever diversity there might be, there is still, I believe, a loophole in it, which allows developers or people who have a financial incentive or reason not to build affordable housing housing, not to build affordable housing. So the purpose of the plan is affordable housing, but they get to wiggle their way out of it, if my understanding is correct. And I spent some time paying attention to this and bringing comments to the city council and city planning on that. So and in Seattle, they said to developers, you want to build downtown? We need family size apartments. Families want to live downtown, build them. So the developers had to, because they don't have as of right. And as a result, the city said to them, well, that's great. You built all this family housing. Now we need preschools or elementary schools or some kind of school. If you want to build downtown, you have to build schools. And they did. We never say that. And when we say it, it's always with an enormous loophole that gives them what they want to do. The idea that raising the cap will increase affordable housing, I think, is just misguided. It's a great approach. I mean, it's a great theory that we'll get more affordable housing, but we don't have any height limits and we haven't seen any affordable housing. They do what they want to do. And with the starting prices, they're not even appealing to New Yorkers. How many New Yorkers could afford $5 million for a 2-bedroom apartment or a 3-bedroom apartment? They're foreign investors that don't care about communities, and all they do is pump profits into developers. I know I'm cynical, but we just haven't seen anything. The city has, Scott Stringer did a study, 1,000 pieces of land that they could use a not-for-profit developer to build affordable housing. Have they done it? No. These are all gifts to developers, and they're all premised on REBNY's need for more and more and more profits at the expense of neighborhoods. I just don't see it, and I am stopping. I did confine it, I thought, to the idea of
Yes,
FAR.
yes,
Yes.
You did.
There's no guarantee. I'm
Barely.
sorry, I have a very large podium. I will stop. Will, feel free to mute me. I'm done.
Michelle.
Call the question.
Okay. All right. First, I guess we have to ask if there is anyone who is opposed to calling the question. Taking on hand. Seeing none. We now get to do the sort of weird calling of the roll that we do, which is that anyone who is opposed, abstaining, or not voting for cause, please raise your hands. Not surprising. Adam?
Vote no.
Okay. Billy?
I'm sorry, it's not surprising, but I am voting no.
I didn't say it wasn't surprising.
Anthony,
Adam was not surprising. Yes.
Anthony, could you repeat the resolution Valerie asked?
Okay, so, sorry. The resolution on the floor is to, in opposition to removing, we'll clear up the language, is the opposition to removing the FAR 12 cap at the state level, okay, which is part of the governor's budget proposal. Okay, and I got a thumbs up there, so I said it right. Sharon?
Did you get Billy's vote? I'm sorry.
I did. Billy voted no, didn't he?
Yeah, I voted no.
Yeah,
Okay. Thanks. Sharon?
Can I pass for just a moment?
Sure. And Lori?
I'm going to abstain.
Abstain. And that was a very short moment, Sharon. I'm sorry.
I also had a message from Craig that he wanted to abstain.
Okay.
Sharon, go ahead and unmute.
I'm abstaining.
Okay. I don't know how many of us are here, but
let me read everybody's name into the record so that it's in the video. So we have Anthony Cohen, Elizabeth Ashby, Adam Wald, Alita Camp, Billy Freeland, Craig Lader, Elaine Walsh, Gail Barron, Leo Yu, Lori Boris, Marco Tamayo, Michelle Birnbaum, Mrs. Brown, Rita Popper, Sherry Weiner, Sharon Pope Marshall, Valerie Mason. Did I miss anyone? Raise your hand if I missed you. I don't believe I missed anyone. So that is the list.
Great. Thank you, Will. And so now back over to Elizabeth.
Well, I think I've covered our proposal unless somebody has a question about it. And then I think perhaps we should go to old and new business. Oh, Leah Hanlon.
Thank you very much. As some of you know, I've been trying to get the committee to consider how the outcome of the Blood Center Tower application relates to the special zoning proposal for a height limit. I would suggest that the Blood Center won its application not because of any merits of its case, but because it ran a very effective PR campaign playing on stereotypes of the Upper East Side. Upper East Siders were accused of NIMBYism, racism, and every other kind of entitlement, and that's how the city council voted. I also think that to some extent, we weren't astute in how we positioned ourselves and we played into that stereotype. For example, many people were justifiably concerned about shadows on St. Catherine's Park, but we were just mocked for that position. Even a New York Times columnist wrote about it. It wasn't a really effective strategy. So I think that that same prejudice against the Upper East Side is going to work against our proposal for a height limit and anything else of a similar nature. What if Lenox Hill Hospital renews its desire to build a 500-foot tower on Park Avenue so it can build a world-class medical tourist destination? I think that I hope that the committee will consider whether some sort of public relations strategy would help, would make it more likely for the height limit and anything else we're proposing to pass. And I hope you'll consider that. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have thought about how we market, if that's the word, for what we want. But I think we're aware of how we get accused of every sin under the clouds, but still, it is something that we have to be aware of. And maybe what we need to do is find some volunteer PR person who can give us lessons, but I think it's certainly something that we have to bear in mind as we go ahead. Thank you. Now, Marco, and then I think we'll go to old business.
Just a brief answer to the lady that just spoke. The bottom line is, yes, I was one of the person who started opposing the blood center. And I never, ever, even though that I can make a very good argument, I never put shadows in my argument. I never use any other type of argument. The only argument that I use is just only transportation. And the PR, I think, is crucial. But the problem is, not even with a good PR, you can resolve this matter, because this matter was resolved between the developer and the mayor of the city of New York. Everything was cooked, and it's impossible to do anything about that. And the only thing is, in the time of elections, we had to elect the right persons. That's up to each of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. Okay, any old business? New business?
Elizabeth, Gail appears to be waving her hand frantically, not using the raise hand function. There you go. You're unmuted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I apologize. My computer's been cranky and I've been having some problems with the iPhone. I just wanted to note that almost everything that was discussed tonight in some manner really went back to the zoning resolution. And seeing all of the different initiatives, whether it's outdoor dining, whether it's dancing, I think that your proposal was so interesting, Adam, and certainly something that should be carefully considered. When we look at the 210 height limit, what I would like to recommend, if the committee concurs, is that the co-chairs formally send a note to the chair of the community board and ask that any items that really in some way impact zoning come to the zoning and development committee first. Because part of the problem, for example, is it goes straight to land use. 3 East 89th Street is a perfect example. We ended up with 2 long meetings dealing with that one issue, where had that come to zoning first, we would have been able to hone it down, ask those questions ahead of time, get more input from the public. So I think at this point in time, with so many things that are cropping up regarding zoning, we have to be thoughtful, and it's true, reevaluate, see where zonings should change, where it shouldn't. But if you look at the Blood Center with R8B, with our mid blocks, how do we go forward with affordable housing, keep the tenements, but also ensure that we don't suddenly have these gigantic towers squeezed in on the mid-block, quality of life and all of that. And I believe that the Zoning and Development Committee is best, should best address that. We also have, frankly, a lot of members of this board who do not attend zoning and development meetings. I'm not even certain if they have taken advantage of the sessions that are provided by the borough president's office. So if we can just kind of end up with that request, and then just let the all of us on zoning and development take that first look, volunteer to do the research. So by the time these issues get to land use, I think that they'll be a little more fully baked as far as the gathering of information, which I think is important before we expect the board to suddenly at a land use meeting make a decision on something that can have, maybe it can have positive impact, but often it has a very negative impact. Thank you.
Thank you. Elaine?
Thank you. I thought that on the agenda was also the restaurant on 81st Street that is in a R8B area, grandfathered in, and is zoned for use group 6, but they are saying they may not know it, that they're using use group 9 for catering. And I'm concerned about this because what we're seeing is an encroachment onto R8B. It's a whittling away. It's a dangerous precedent. We've seen it before, 2 very current ones, and historically I know of another one. And, you know, in 1985, the City Planning Commission recognized the incompatibility of mid-block projects built under R7 and R8 regulations and the long-term importance of the city to maintain a balanced development and quality of life for the Upper East Side. And therefore they approved an R8B zoning for the mid-blocks. There were 190 blocks. Now, the Blood Center will go to 189. Maybe there's another one. Well, I can think of another one. But what the city planning was saying.
Blood Center was.
Yeah, that's a biggie. That is the one that is going.
That was the death of R8B.
Well, and it should not be, and Adam's laughing because he doesn't maybe see the same thing. But yes, don't think developers are going to creep in. But let's look at what everybody's saying about we need affordable housing. In the R8B, what it created and maintains is existing scale, provision of light and air, control of density and protection of existing tenements as a vital housing resource on the mid-blocks of the Upper East Side. Expressed as public policy, there's an interest in preserving mid-blocks because they form enclaves within the larger community and offer a quiet refuge from the busier avenues and provide a viable and attractive housing resource for a wide range of income groups. So the balancing of high density on the avenues, which hopefully will stay at 210, and the mid-block R8B low zoning makes our community more habitable. And I think we need to stress why city planning did this in 1985, why in 1984 they did the west side of the city in Community Board 7 and 6. And it was done in order to maintain a quality of life and provide light and air and affordability for a range of different incomes. And we need to keep pushing that. And the more the developers creep in and try to take away R8B, we will continue to lose affordable housing. The applications for that restaurant impinges on the life of the people living in that building and living on the block. It was in street life. They made their decision. It is a violation of the R8B. And I'd like to move that our committee pass a resolution against the permission of that restaurant to function with a use group of R9. I'm not sure if quite the language, but that's what we're doing. We want to maintain what was grandfathered in for that site. Because if they are allowed to do this, there goes the other grandfathered restaurants in the community that are in R8B. And we had residents from that block complaining. They live there. They know the area. I happen to know that restaurant. And they lied on a few things. It is not ADA, by the way. And it's not going to put a ramp out. So don't even think that. So I'd like to move that we disallow that application based on the zoning regulations for R8B.
Thank you, Elaine.
Second.
Alita?
Second.
We've got a few seconds.
Rita Gale.
Marco
Number
or
seconds.
Yes, thank you again, Elizabeth. The issue of that part is the rationality of the person that did the presentation, who is an expediter, was, did you see any other restaurant that they closing and they do the parties? Of course. So let's go do 80 and 20. That was exactly the word that he said. So 80% as a restaurant and 20% as a catering. So what he's doing, what he's saying is more or less, I see also bicycles on the sidewalk. So let's go do it 80-20. 80% comply with the laws of the transportation and 20% walk ride on the sidewalk. That will be the rationality of this person. And that was completely mad when I hear that. It means it's outrage to come this person and make this rationality, and fellow community members they support. They support against the law. And that is made me concerned more. We're talking about a city. This city in order to have a good city, especially our neighborhood is the highest dense population that we have, we need law and order. And the only way to develop, to drive is with the law. And the law is the zoning resolution. And the zoning resolution, the building department clearly said, eating and drinking establishment group 6, and they are coming to the community board, eating and drinking establishment and group 9, where even the law, even the zoning resolution, we are complaining about the Department of Buildings, they don't do their job. I was in a meeting with the Department of Buildings, and they say, yes, we do have a lot of mistakes. Yes, the professionals, they do a lot of mistakes. What makes us harder to do even the job is the community boards that go against us. It makes it almost impossible to enforce our own regulations. And I think that is what Elaine said is right. We had to disallow this one because it's wrong. We cannot approve something that is unlawful. And that is my point. That is, I'm really, I feel very strong about that part. And finally, the zoning resolution, according with the applicant, it said this restaurant has been empty for more than 2 years. She said clearly, the zoning resolution called also to lose the grandfather after 2 years. So I can go in that direction, but I didn't. I want to maintain the grandfather because, okay, we're going to give you the benefits of the doubt. But no, we right now, we go against 2 zoning resolutions. One, the grandfather that is more than 2 years, they're supposed to be removed, the CO. And the second, increase from group 6 to group 9. I think it's completely wrong. Thank you. And thank you, Lane.
Mrs. Brown had her hand up, just letting you know.
Michelle?
Thank you, Elizabeth. Call the question on Elaine's resolution, please.
Michelle, did you hear what I said?
What?
That Mrs. Brown had her hand up. She just isn't.
Oh, she can go before me. That's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Will.
Since Michelle has called for the question to be called, I agree with Elaine's resolution, so we can go ahead and call the question. Thank you.
Well,
Did you
I think
repeat your resolution? Elaine, could you repeat your resolution?
Based on the zoning for the premise on East 81st Street, move to disallow their application to open and use more than the use group 6 and cannot use use group 9. I would add, but I won't.
Second the motion. Second the resolution.
Okay. Has the question been called?
yes, Michelle called the question.
Oh, yes. Okay. Raise your hand if you want to abstain, vote no, or not voting for cause.
I have a message from Craig that he is abstaining. And Lori, go ahead and unmute.
I have a question of information, and that is that is it appropriate for us to do this without having the parties in question here to discuss it? I mean, did we post that we were going to discuss this?
No, it's a new business item.
Okay, but if it's a new business item and we didn't post it that we were talking about a particular business, I mean, I think that we are obliged, and correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't we obliged to notify the business that we're discussing this and give them a chance to speak about it?
It's a good question. Perhaps we should write a letter because we don't need that that problem wouldn't arise. So new business and old business, you don't post because you don't know what people are going to bring up. So that does put us in a quandary. But would people think that the solution would be the board writing a letter to city planning, or
No, because it's not. It's sort of weird because I'm not sure to whom a letter would be appropriately addressed at this point. I think we have a number of other people, though, Elizabeth, who might want to speak to the applicability of a resolution in these circumstances.
Okay.
Just guessing, hoping.
So you want me to call in people even though we're voting?
Yeah, let's call on like Elaine. Elaine has her hand up. So does Michelle, Sherry, and Sharon.
Okay, go ahead.
This item came up at the full board meeting last week. It was publicly announced. Notice was given. I requested it be put on the agenda for tonight, and we did so. I think we have followed the procedures that were necessary. I would assume, maybe I shouldn't, we know what that means, that the applicant was at that meeting. It doesn't matter because it was a streetlight agenda. Therefore, I think it's appropriate to do the resolution.
Michelle?
Yes, that's what I was going to say. The applicant has had his public hearing. It was noticed, it was heard, everybody had a chance to weigh in. So he has been in the public domain. So I think us doing this tonight is appropriate.
Thank you. Sherry?
I think it's more of a procedural issue. It never should have gone to street life. It should have gone to zoning. And then we would have given our opinion then. And since we were excluded, I think it's very appropriate for us to comment upon it and give our disapproval. I think that was the big problem. Why should it was a zoning issue. Why was it not assigned to zoning and development? So I strongly support that we do a resolution saying this was not a good decision. That's not an issue that they deal with. So I don't understand why it was sent to them.
But I don't think that it's appropriate for us to make a decision on something when we haven't heard in this committee from the applicant, from the other side.
But everybody heard at the board meeting, Lori.
Right, and there was a recommendation I believe, at the board meeting. Was there not? Did the Street Life Committee make a recommendation?
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, the Street Life Committee made a resolution to support their application.
Right,
And
so
the board voted on it.
Right, exactly. Thank you, Will. I think it's inappropriate. I really think that it's inappropriate and that it would raise questions that you maybe don't want to deal with. I mean, if you want them to come here and talk about it, fine. But it sounds to me like you're being irritated that it wasn't sent to the zoning committee, like they didn't do it correctly. So, I mean,
right. We already discussed it and we know the issues. I don't think there's anything more to be learned by having them come back and speak to us. They're violating the zoning. I mean, there's not really much more information than
all right, well, I'm going to vote against this.
That's your opinion. I guess most people don't agree with you, but we heard your opinion. That's all.
Okay.
Sharon?
I think I'm going to vote against this as well. I just need to have some clarification. However, I'd like to know, will the Street Life Committee presented a recommendation to the full board did the full board vote on the Streetlight Committee's recommendation?
Yes.
Then
It was the
yes,
vote of
yes,
25
Will.
in favor and 11 opposed.
Okay. So this application did receive did have a platform with the community board, and the community board did vote on it. My first concern is that this seems some, you know what, first of all, I think I want everybody to know that I do think that the zoning committee should have received the application. Let's first get that out of the way. However, now that it was vetted by Streetlight and the board has decided on it, I am concerned that the zoning committee would be perceived in a very petty manner. And at this juncture, I think the issue is certainly not with the Streetlight Committee. They were given the assignment and they discharged their duties, I would imagine. And the board voted and the process was followed.
Yes and no.
Okay.
The zoning was the zoning issue, which is the issue of allowing a restaurant to function as a catering hall. In other words, from use group 6 to use group 9, was not part of what Streetlife was concerned with. Streetlife's concern is strictly whether or not these people should get a liquor license, not whether or not they have observed the appropriate zoning. By way of example, and I'm really trying hard not to rely on anecdote, but I'm going to. In our meetings of the Landmarks Committee, we absolutely positively do not consider whether or not the building is violating the zoning or violating the building code, as much as Marco tries to get us to look at it the other way. We do it, we make our judgment strictly on the basis of the charge to us by the community board, which is to look at the appropriateness of the project in a landmark district or the appropriateness of a project to an individual landmark. By the same token, Streetlife looks at liquor licenses. We look at zoning. We are perfectly within the purview of our committee to make and pass or not pass, reject a resolution concerning the zoning and the possibility of this particular operator extending his grandfathered uses beyond what is permitted by his grandfathering. And that was barely English, but
No,
so,
that was very good, and I appreciate not only the background, but certainly the explanation. I do think that it sheds some additional light, and I appreciate that, Anthony. So referring back to what Elaine Walsh said, that notice was given at the last community board, last full board meeting. So that notice was that that we would have this discussion at the zoning committee level regarding the appropriateness of the zoning. Is that correct? Because that's what I heard. I mean, is that correct? And did I hear
yes,
and understand?
and because the zoning
Elaine
was, yeah, and because the zoning was not taken up, Sharon, we can certainly take up the zoning now. And whether or not what we are in fact, I believe, resolved if we pass this resolution, we are resolved that this particular operator in this particular location not be allowed to violate the zoning by running a catering hall. I think
Okay,
that's the point.
yes, I think that's, yeah, I totally understand that. Did we invite the applicant to come to our committee meeting?
No, I'm seeing a no.
So, and how was it announced at the full board meeting that we were going to take this up in the zoning committee?
Sharon, either we're going to vote on it or we're not going to vote on it. We're either going to vote yes or we're going to vote no. The question has been called. I believe
Yes,
that
I'm
it is
asking,
hang on,
clarifying.
let me finish.
Sure,
I
sure.
believe that the sense of the majority of board members present at this meeting is that we can go ahead and vote on a resolution and pass it or not pass it. And that in fact, if we're in error, that will be pointed out to us before this comes before the full board next month.
No,
The last
listen,
time I looked,
and
everything
thank you.
we do is subject to them.
Sure,
us,
sure.
rather,
You know
all
what?
of us involved.
I totally understand, including what the general sense is of the board. But you know what? I think independently. I don't go with the crowd, and that's why I'm asking for these. I'm asking clarifying questions so
No,
that I
look,
I
okay,
know.
let me try
and
and lay
I
it out.
are-
I'm
and
sorry,
I
Sharon.
already.
I'm not interrupting you. I'm just trying to say.
Sure, no problem. Let me just finish the sentence because I think it's important that, you know, I said that with respect to the zoning, we certainly should be voting on that. But I just want to be clear that that a proper notice was given, and clearly I'm not the only person who was concerned about that. And also I followed up to find out whether or not the applicant was invited to this meeting. And also at any point, certainly after I conclude my questions, anyone can call the question.
The question has actually been called.
Or
I understand what you're saying.
thank you.
Should we continue with the rest of the hands? Or should we just call the question?
Mrs. Brown wanted to ask something, and Valerie had a point of information. And I feel like those are privileged.
Yes.
Okay. Valerie and then Mrs. Brown.
Okay, so I just want to say that, you know, Lori made a good point, but I think Anthony just answered it. We can do the resolution. There's a public meeting. The applicant can come back at the public meeting if it wants to say something about the resolution. And at that point, either it goes forward or it doesn't go forward. So that was all I was going to say. The resolution of the committee is not a binding resolution of the board yet. So I think it's appropriate to just go forward. And to Anthony's point, that will be determined at the other meeting. But it is appropriate for two committees to look at the same issue independently. And just as a point of order, this has come up before where we missed it. And it was, there was an application for a townhouse. I don't know if anybody would remember, it was last year that Landmarks had approved the application, but it didn't come to, I believe, transportation. It was about an outdoor ramp.
Oh yeah.
And it was too late. It was already done, and they were coming back to us to get approval, even though they had already built the ramp. Michelle, you should be remembering this because you talked about it at length. Not you should be remembering it, but that's why I remembered it. And so I think it's appropriate that we're catching it even much earlier in the process. So I think, again, Lori's point is a valid one. We should go ahead, vote on the motion, and it will all get settled up at the main meeting, in the next main meeting.
Thank you, Valerie.
Yes, this is Mrs. Brown. I wanted to be noted when Cause presented the resolution, it was presented without the stipulations. There was a correction to the minutes, and the stipulations are, there were two stipulations. One, they could not operate as a catering hall, and two, they had to be ADA compliant. The second, the elevator does not go to the second floor. And those were the two stipulations, and they weren't included. The second one was not included. So I just wanted to note that that was an issue. And then, yes, Elaine presented it, that it wanted it to be forwarded to this committee this evening. So they were noticed. Thank you.
Call the question. Thank you, Mrs. Brown. The question, I believe, has been called.
Should we
so-
restart the vote?
Yes.
Just so
Yes,
that,
we should.
okay. So if your hand is up right now, you're going to vote no, abstain, or not vote for cause. And if you already told us on this exact thing, please raise your hand again. I don't want to make Anthony have to go all the way back in the video to find where that was. So Lori, and then I see Craig, and I see Elaine. So starting with
Abstain.
Lori. Lori
Abstain.
is abstaining. Okay, Craig.
I'm a no.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Craig. You're a no. Is there anyone else? I felt like there was somebody else previously, but maybe I'm wrong.
Would you repeat the resolution, please, what we're voting for? Thank you. So we're clear.
Anthony?
Yeah. This is a resolution against the expansion of the operation of this restaurant into catering, which would move it from use group 6 to use group 9. Use group 6 is, this is just sort of more background than I hope will be in the, well, it'll be in the resolution. It's grandfathered in as use group 6, and but not grandfathered into use group 9. And as it is an R8B zone, they are that is not a use group allowed as of right in an R8B zone. And so this is a resolution against that expansion of function.
Okay.
Yeah, I got some nods.
So
we had.
A yes means you're.
Yes means we don't want them to do catering. I mean, sort of.
Are you good, Mrs. Brown, or do you need to vote?
Oh, I'm voting yes.
Okay, thanks. Lori, did you need to change your vote? Lori, you're
No, I wanted clarification. Can we get the name of the restaurant, please?
Portable Provisions at 220 East 81st Street. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. That sounds right.
Okay, thank you. No, my vote remains the same.
Last call. Any other votes? If not, I'm going to read the names of the board members who are still in attendance: Anthony Cohn, Elizabeth Ashby, Adam Wald, Alita Camp, Craig Lader, Elaine Walsh, Gail Barron, Leo Yu, Lori Boris, Marco Tamayo, Michelle Birnbaum, Mrs. Brown, Rita Popper, Sherry Weiner, Sharon Pope Marshall, and Valerie Mason. Did I miss anyone? It looks like it's everyone.
So the motion passed. Michelle?
Move to adjourn.
I think we have. I think we have a couple of, before we do adjourn, I think we have a couple of items that Alita would like to mention that are on the order of new business.
Thanks, Anthony. I'll be brief. I have resolution and a non-resolution. I'll do the non-resolution first, and hopefully the resolution is non-controversial. The non-resolution is ULURP is broken. It is so beneficial to applicants that we might not as well not even waste time and money going through it. So I would like to ask the committee to take up the issue of how to fix ULURP so communities actually have a voice that counts in the land use process. That's that. And the resolution has to do with, given the passion of this committee, and also, if I can presume, and I've been to some of the meetings, the Housing Committee for Affordable Housing, I'd like to ask for a resolution that any demolition of buildings that may contain affordable housing or rent regulated units be required to report the number of units that are being demolished, so that we have accurate counts, because the tax records, the zoning records, or other records are inconsistent and they're incomplete, and there's no easy way of knowing. And then we can continue to prove our case that we don't have affordable housing and that we're losing it. And so I think a developer should be called to account for the damage they're wreaking on neighborhoods.
Is there a second? I see Rita's hand.
And could I add, Anthony, I'd just like to ask Mrs. Brown and Rita or Billy to bring this to housing, because if it passed here and could pass at housing, that it would maybe have some force.
Yes. I think there's a lot of overlap on those two committees, and I think we'll do that. I believe Marco has his hand up.
Thank you. I agree with Euler. Euler, he touched finally, and one fellow community member is gonna be upset for that. The other one is about counting. Yes, we are required every time that we file an application, we are required to file how many dwelling units you demolish. It's always in the record of the Department of Buildings. The biggest problem that the community has is which project is demolished at. But if you check the application, that's the information that is required by right now DOB. Yeah, it has been for a while, Alida. Yeah, it's a good idea, but the problem is, for instance, the affordable housing, they usually handle HPD, no DOB. And DOB, the information that they issue on their records, they manipulate the information. For instance, the project of 74 on York Avenue, there are 10 affordable dwelling units, and the 10 affordable units they declared that was built on the site, when in reality it was built in the Bronx in one of the stressful neighborhood. So, and that is the problem. The problem is, I think, is going in different direction. Is not to know at this time that the report has to be more clear, and HPD should send the information to us. I think that is the direction that we have to go, because you really need to know how many affordable housing we are losing. But DOB, they report in the record. You check the buildings, and they show out how many affordable units they are demolished. And not only that, they're required to have anti-harassment declaration. Otherwise, they cannot even close. They can't even demolish. But the problem is the paperwork in the Department of Buildings. That's what I filed myself. So I'm telling by experience what are we doing. They also require to have a declaration for the HDCR, something like that, the name, which is the rent control and rent stabilization city, that they declare how many units has been the landlord declared that is rent control and rent stabilization, and it's required right now. And that's a matter of fact, is one of the objections that I receive myself, and I start fighting with the building owner and say, I need this information. So it is required. So probably what we need is to organize better what exactly the information we need to do that. But otherwise, it means it's a lose of time. But your idea is great, Alida. Thank you.
Thank you. So because I recollect with, what was his name, Jared Kushner, he had inconsistent information, both that he wasn't tearing down affordable housing units, and then for the tax records, he was tearing them down. So he would get some kind of tax benefit, I think, but I don't know. So then maybe the solution is to take it up at another meeting, either housing or zoning, and look at the kinds of questions that should be asked. And I see Rita's raising her hand. So but I'm not chairing this meeting, so Anthony or Elizabeth, but thank you. Marco, it seems more complicated than I was thinking.
Yeah, yes, I think it is. So perhaps we should take it up at housing, and then since it's not something that has to be settled this month before the next board meeting, perhaps we can take it up in more detail and sort of look at maybe even a mechanism whereby we could get that information more easily rather than teasing it out. Rita has her hand up, but it's just her physical hand. Does she have her other hand? Oh, she has her other hand up as well.
All my hands. When Alita was chair, we had a very interesting, I think it was a full board meeting with Gary Barnett from Extel. And we talked about the entire block that Extel took down on First Avenue between 79th Street and 80th Street on the east side of the street. And I asked him how many affordable, where did he put the people who were in affordable apartments, where did they go? And he looked at me, he said, there were no affordable apartments in the entire block. Not one, he said. So we know that that's not true. It may not have been the full block. There might have been, even if there were 5, that he got away with nothing. Therefore, there are no affordable housing. He doesn't have to put those people up or whatever. So I want you to know that it's not an honest system. It's a system, but it's not honest.
Can I add? I'm sorry, Rita, could I add something before Michelle goes, which is also we should ask them about the small businesses, the size of the business, how many square feet, and the rent that the business was paying, so we could compare with the disasters that invariably seem to follow with this new construction in terms of small business.
I think that's a very good point, Alita. And it would be helpful if you would just write a quick note to us so we remember to mention all of these things when we get the house, because I think you're right.
Okay, thank you.
And the loss of businesses is important too. Okay, and I think we have Michelle.
Thank you.
So I think this should be a joint meeting with housing. Is that what you're proposing? Oh, okay, good.
Sort of,
and
yeah.
And it sounds, well, I think it should be posted as joint because we're going to come up with one resolution. So I think it should be posted as a joint meeting. And since, as Marco explains, it's already part of the process, our resolution, but it's to be further discussed because there's obviously more points, but would not be so much to propose asking for this information, but as to propose to enforce the existing requirement that they provide us with this information. But again, I think it should go joint to housing. Now, can I
think
adjourn?
that's a good idea. Please.
Adjourn.
Marco is there anyone opposed to adjourning our meeting? Seeing none, we will see you next month. Thank you so much.
Okay, good meeting. Very good. Thank you.